Yeah, good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Trans-Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me for the next 3 hours, Andy Brassell, as always, the heart and soul of the programme. And despite the fact there are no league matches except in the Republic of Ireland and one or two Scandinavian leagues across Europe, I have to tell you, this is going to be an absolutely belting show. Just so much stuff to get through. All the major stories from across the continent, obviously. The massive news that Lyon have been relegated to the second tier of French football. We'll review the Club World Cup. Mbappe Watch will be along. We've got a very interesting author for you who's written a book about the year that Verona, yes, Verona, won Serie A. Tim Vickery will join us from South America. Andy will take you around the leagues. We'll talk about how footballers, even those on £300,000 a week, are being treated like dirt, and much else besides. It couldn't be a more packed show, and I really am massively looking forward to it. Me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell, you, the listening millions, talk sport on a Sunday night. What more could you want? Welcome aboard, everybody. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
Good evening, Danny. I'm full of joy as Flamengo versus Bayern has just kicked off. So I love it the most here on Trans-Europe Express when we've got games, or at least a game, going on during the show. And I hope you feel the same.
Well, two games, right? Because there's also the game in the Gold Cup between Canada and Guatemala. Quarterfinals just kicked off. But I'm going to try and watch the game with Bayern Munich because. But we'll see whether the broadcast hosts ask me to rejoin their service as they do every single time I turn on the television. Possibly in the host of me getting me to upgrade to Super Hyper Beauty. But I'm not going to upgrade to Super Hyper Beauty. I'm quite happy to watch in fuzzy vision for free of charge. Andy, your great mood, I think I can break it in one sentence. Your beloved Lyon have been relegated to the second level of the French football. It's a huge story because one of their owners can't organise the proverbial birthday party in the property of Watneys. It's incredible.
No, he couldn't organise a 7-course dinner in Lyon, I think is the way it's probably put locally. Of course, the gastronomic capital of France for the last 400 years, but as stands, one that will not have a top-tier football team next season, despite the fact Olympique Lyonnais finished in 6th place last season. And when Textor has been clutching at various straws, John Textor, the owner, the de facto owner of Lyon, has been saying, well, look, the results have been all right. I mean, never mind after the money you've spent, it should have been Champions League, and it could have been Champions League last season. Making the Champions League either through the Europa League, which they kind of threw away at Old Trafford, or through the Ligue 1 table, were both within reach, and the money from that would have made a massive difference. Although John Textor's sums have been poor enough that I think you have to question how did they end up in this situation in the first place? Because really, you're looking at a club that gets gates of over 45,000 all the time, that has decent revenue, that competes in European competition, and yet has reached this situation. We may remember, and I think this is the crucial part of it, that Lyon have been in financial strife a few times. They've been up before the DNCG, who are, of course, the French Financial Control Board, a couple of times since he's taken over in late 2022. They've been banned from transfers. They were briefly banned from transfers by FIFA for 2.5 years earlier in the summer for not settling a debt of €2,000. That's the sort of attention to detail.
Andy, let me jump in there, because in the Club World Cup, Bayern Munich have taken the lead already in that game against Flamengo. Flamengo nil, huge crowd, I must say, because we've been commenting on some of the smaller crowds. Absolutely packed stadium. Let's get in really well. The Moose is there for talkSPORT. Let's get the news on this early goal in this match.
Yeah, in the Hard Rock Stadium, it is Bayern Munich 1, Flamengo 0. 6 minutes on the clock. It was a corner on the near side. It was played towards the near post. I think they were aiming for someone like Joshua Kimmich at the near post, but what it was an own goal. It flicked off the defender at the near post. The goalkeeper, Rossi, had absolutely no chance, and it just sort of kissed the far post as it went in. Bayern Munich with a dream start, beaten by Benfica in their last game. 7 changes for this one, including a return of the likes of Michael Olise and Harry Kane, and inside 6 minutes they are ahead. Polgar with the own goal. It's Flamengo 0, Bayern Munich 1.
Yeah, and I know it's a cliche to say it. That was actually a really good finish. If he'd been wearing a different shirt, you'd have said that was a clever header. Left poor old Rossi there on the goal line. Absolutely ruthless. Now, Andy, you were giving us a very serious overview of what all that's happened at Lyon. But come on, tell us about the day during the week when Textor turned up to try and save his club. Because, honestly, if it had been written by the Monty Python crew, it would have been, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think Eric Idle and John Cleese would have just sat there and said, this is just too silly, wouldn't they? Yeah. They would have said that. And so what happened, of course, John Textor, having had an increasingly bad relationship with the DNCG, needed to show, I think, appropriate decorum for this, that they were already under the threat of administrative relegation, so not sportingly induced relegation, since November, because the DNCG felt the numbers didn't add up in Lyon's budget, which, if you've seen Textor perform mass in a press conference, you're maybe not that surprised by. So he turns up, of course, also the owner of Botafogo, part of the Eagle Football Group, turns up directly on a flight from Los Angeles, where he's been watching his Botafogo team, directly to Paris, wearing the Botafogo cap still, turns up off this transatlantic flight to meet all the journalists in Paris, tell them everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, as he's on the way into the LFP, the French League building. Press is on the buzzer. can't get in. Continues pressing on the buzzer for about 10 minutes. And anyway, so obviously the journalists take advantage of the situation and go, tell us more about the financial plan you've got for Lyon. He's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Let me tell you about what a great time I've been having in LA with Botafogo. So he regales them with that for 10, 15 minutes until him and his lawyer finally get let in, and the general manager of Lyon finally get let into the building. He comes out afterwards, still wearing the Botafogo cap, and says, everything's absolutely fine. We've got a far greater cash flow than before. Everything's really like coming up roses for us. Everything's going to be great. This threat of administration is going to be swept away. By the way, I don't think I can get a direct flight back to the Club World Cup in Philadelphia from here. Can anyone recommend a hotel for the night? And
Andy, a second goal in the game between Flamengo and Bayern Munich. Let's see which way it's gone with Ian Abrahams.
It's gone to Bayern Munich. Flamengo 0, Bayern Munich 2, and it's Harry Kane. Of course, it's Harry Kane picking the ball up from a colleague about 25 yards out. One touch, two touch towards the edge of the penalty area. Left-footed shot, which went in via the bottom post. Rossi had absolutely no chance, and Luis Felipe took a slight deflection, actually, having seen a replay of it, if the truth be told. But Luis Felipe, the manager of Flamengo, must be wondering what on earth has happened here. Inside 10 minutes, Vincent Kompany's side are 2 ahead. Flamengo 0, Bayern Munich 2.
I think I can tell Luis Felipe what's happened. Normal business has been restored. A left foot shot by Kane from the edge of the box. It's one of those goals, when he puts the ball 1 inch inside the post and 1 inch beyond the goalkeeper's reach. Absolutely brilliant finish, truthfully. So that makes it 2-0 to Bayern. So Andy, now he's saying I can't get a direct flight back to Los Angeles in my special
Philadelphia
hat.
this time.
Philadelphia, in my special hat. So presumably he has to try and find alternate accommodation.
Yeah, he does, and off he goes into the night. For an hour later, the DNCG and the LFP to announce that Lyon have been relegated to the second tier, pending appeal, obviously, which they will take. Now, this was on Tuesday. They had to wait until Friday to get the reasoning behind the decision, and from there they have a week to apply for leave to appeal. It's got to be closed pretty quickly because they've brought out the fixtures already for Ligue 1 and Ligue 2. Of course, if Lyon were to go down, if the decision were to be upheld, Stade Reims, who were relegated in the playoff last season, of course, competitors in the first 2 European Cup finals back in the 50s, they would be restored to Ligue 1. They've already sold a couple of their players, and they've had a budget that's gone through that is a Ligue 2 budget. So they would have to go back through the DNCG to get a Ligue 1 budget approved. So there's a lot hanging on this. Now, of course, there is precedent for this to be reversed. If we go back to 2003, 2004, the season that Monaco under Didier Deschamps got to the Champions League final, they were actually relegated for financial shortcomings at the start of that season, and it was overturned on appeal. They nearly won the league and they got to the European Cup final where they lost to Jose Mourinho's Porto, of course. But if you're looking for 2 reasons or 2 words why this appeal might not be successful, they're John Textor. Those are the 2 words, really, because he's come out for the first time this week and admitted, you know what, I don't really understand the way that things financially work in France. Well, anyone like us 2 could have told him that a couple of transfer windows ago. Bear in mind all the chicanery that they did to try and get around various transfer restrictions and transfer bans, including when they signed Dia Chaleta-Char, getting Southampton to continue paying his wages, paid Southampton to pay his wages, loaning Thiago Almada, the World Cup winner, the brilliant Argentinian World Cup winner.
Fantastic football,
from Botafogo for free whilst under a transfer ban, saying, well, it's part of the same group. And every single club Lyon played against protested that last season. And really, I think that's really at the heart of it. The fact that it's not just the raw numbers. DNCG is about showing respect to the board, showing respect to the way things are done. And he's never fostered any of that goodwill. If we go back to November in the original suspended decision of relegation, Textor sat giving a press conference to the world going, I don't think these guys on the board understand how Wall Street works or understand how the multi-club model works. Well, it was never their responsibility to do so. It was his responsibility to understand how French football's finances worked, and he never did that. So basically, there have been widespread protests against him in the city. I think a few people were expecting it to go a certain way because all these text or out banners that were hung over the city had been pre-printed and were up within hours of the decision. The club megastore was tagged with text or out as well, and it looks like that's going to be the case. He borrowed money from an alternative investment fund called Ares to fund the purchase of Lyon 3 years ago in the first place, 460 million euros, and they want their money back at some point. So a couple of other representatives of Eagle, Michael Gerlinger, who used to be at Bayern Munich, and Michelle Kang, the businesswoman who now owns Olympique Lyonnais, the feminine team, who are very successful, of course. It looks like they'll be taking control of the club in the short term, and they'll certainly be taking care of the appeal. And it looks like Textor is going to be moved to the side, and not a minute too soon.
Andy, I mean, I think, part of me thinks back to when Frenchmen, Henri Delaunay, Jules Rimet, etc., invented the way football works, the World Cup, the European Championship, the Champions League, all French ideas, all beautifully brought to life by French administration. And when I see what's going on there now, and I'm not blaming the French administration, allowing Textor to run wild has been a disaster. Matter of interest, Andy, what about, how does it affect, if at all, Crystal Palace? Because, of course, he has found someone to buy his shares in Palace just in time for their appeal, which I think is tomorrow, the verdict, or whether they can play in Europe next season.
I mean, that is something that UEFA have to take into consideration, surely. If there's one thing that's going to save Palace, it's the fact that even though Textor may have been, and Eagle Football may have been the major shareholder, Textor has really made no decisions at Crystal Palace, which is why he got frustrated, why he tried to buy the club outright, and why eventually he's chosen to leave. Now, the guy who's taken up the shares was not his choice. It's not his preferred bidder. Ares, the lender, made him accept that offer. Of course, that can't be taken into account in terms of Lyon's finances. A, because it still has to go through the fit and proper persons test at the Premier League, and B, because Textor won't be getting all of that money. Some of that will be funding the Ares loan. So in the case of Lyon, because it's not quite cut and shut, that didn't make any difference. For Crystal Palace, you would have to assume that they've been able to show enough distance from Textor now that it should be enough for them. But if Textor himself is having a word, well, take it with a pinch of salt and be careful, I would say.
Of course, if Palace were, very quickly, if Palace were to be thrown out, the team that would benefit would be Nottingham Forest. But Textor also has close relations with them. This is a web. Let me just say, Manuel Neuer has just made a fabulous save to keep Bayern Munich 2-0 up in that round of 16 Club World Cup game against Flamengo. We'll keep you across that. The Moose is watching that one for us very closely. Up next here on Trans Europe Express, we'll be going to look at everything that's been happening in France, including a tearful return for Paul Pogba. Yeah, let's turn our attention now here on Trans Europe Express to everything that's been going on in France. I'm going to play you something now. Paul Pogba, after, well, it's over 3 years since he played a full 90 minutes of professional football, signed his contract for Monaco. It was a very emotional event. Listen to this.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Okay? Beautiful to see, my friend, to be here, to live this with you. It's not sorry, it's thank you from our side. Special moment for you, it's also for us.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No, it's just the first step of the next one, Paul. Let's look in front and do the job. The conditions are here, I told you. You're on the right place with the right people.
Thanks for the trust.
Yeah, Paul Pogba there in tears before he was handed a pen, speaking in English, of course, to sign his new contract with Monaco. And Andy, it's very easy to say he's earned a ton of money from the sport. He's got caught doing something that was against the rules and all the rest of it. We live in a redemptive society, and that signing, I didn't get much feeling of fakery about it. I thought he was genuinely overwhelmed that he's going to get another chance to play top flight football with Monaco.
No, and it did seem very spontaneous there because he's shown himself to be really positive throughout his ban, and since the ban has been shortened and completed. Of course, he was originally banned for 4 years, and it was shortened to a year and a half. And he's kept his connections with everyone in the football world. There's a lot of goodwill amongst players who he's played with, staff. Didier Deschamps, who has offered him the possibility of form pending, getting back into the French national team for 2026. And I think this is a big motivation behind him choosing Monaco rather than MLS or Saudi as well.
I see, yeah.
I think obviously he wants to be well paid, but it's not all about money. It's that much is clear, because otherwise he would have taken another option. And I think his dream really is to get there for the 2026 World Cup. Whether that's realistic, Danny, I think is a different question.
Because that's fair. As you say, as a personal goal, it is something to aim for. And Andy, just watching him in the unveiling film that Monaco put out, one thing you have to say, he looks in fantastic shape. Amazing athletic-looking body shape.
He does, and he has when he's been kicking about with his mates and playing basketball as well. Yeah. Professional football is a different kettle of fish, especially at this high level. If he can succeed at Monaco, a team that is expected to put some pressure on the top couple of places in Ligue 1 and are back into the Champions League this season, that will be an unbelievable start for him. But I think we have to rein in expectations a little bit. Bear in mind he's 32 now. He just turned 29 the last time he played a full 90 minutes. For Manchester United... But he has
had the big rest that the top footballers are always wanting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rest and there's a rest. I mean, this is basically what Gary Neville would refer to as a mini retirement, or maybe a maxi retirement. I don't know, because it felt like he was finished at times. But I think as well, you have to look at not everything he's been through. And obviously some people will say an athlete's responsible for what he puts in his body, is self-inflicted. I tend to think he had a lot of injuries and he was absolutely desperate and he was looking for his own solutions at a point where maybe Juventus wanted to find a way to get shot of him, I think it's fair to say, because him signing the second time on big wages was a massive failure for them. And then you think of everything that was going on with the extortion case as well, which involved members of his own family. I don't think you can really underrate what he's been through. And that is why I think at that moment when they put the pen in his hand, he started crying, because he finally got there, back to the place that he wanted to be, playing football. And I think the words that we heard, the other person we heard speaking and saw speaking there, Thiago Scuro, who is the general manager of Monaco, and saying, we're going to look after you, you're in the right place. And I think that's what it's about as well. Monaco is a football environment unlike any other, because of course they're in Ligue 1, but it's not like any other French club because it's not in France. It's somewhere where he will have all the facilities and all the players around him to succeed at the highest level if his body and mind is still up to it. But at the same time, he'll be able to have peace with his family. He's able to live in a nice place. He's able to probably not be one of the 50 most famous people in Monte Carlo, and to have that sort of pressure removed. The difference between signing for Monaco and Marseille in terms of lifestyle, in terms of the pressure on you, it's night and day. It's not even slightly comparable. And when Thiago Scudo said this is the right place for you, I think he's got a good point.
Thank you for that, Andy. The other story that I can't think of another story I'm more looking forward to in the new season anywhere in Europe than that of Paris FC, the tiny, well, comparatively tiny club right in the shadow of Paris Saint-Germain. Indeed, their stadium is literally in the shadow of Paris Saint-Germain, but they're back in the top level. The fixtures are out, and they're starting to make a few good signings.
Yeah, look, Danny, the fixtures are out, and we know what you want to know. The derbies are Parc des Princes, January, Stade Jean-Bouin at mid-May, so a couple of games from the end of the season. And why I want to see the second one in particular, I mean, one of the many things we want to know about Paris FC this season is what are they going to do with the PSG club shop? Because at the moment, the PSG club shop is downstairs in their stadium. I mean, a great way of attracting away fans, I suppose. Presumably that can't endure.
Also, how many tickets? How many tickets will they give to Paris Saint-Germain fans for that game in their little stadium?
I reckon under 1,000. I reckon under 1,000 because it's about 15,000 capacity, and they'll probably cap it.
I hope the Paris Saint-Germain fans have the heart and soul to sing "Champions of Europe." You'll never say that. I hope they do.
Perhaps. But look, they're really ambitious. Now, remember that they're owned by a very, very rich family as well, who own Louis Vuitton. They've got a lot of money coming in, and not a lot of French clubs can say that at the moment. So they've been out there, they've made a big signing this week already. They've signed Moses Simon, the winger from Nantes, who's been really good over the last couple of years. And there's ambition. They want to go out there and get a big name centre forward to lead the line for them. Remember, they've got the operational know-how of Red Bull as well. We'll see Jurgen Klopp there in the stands a couple of times this season. Maybe we'll have a bit more of a chat about Klopp later. Who knows? But look, I think they're in a really good position. If you think of, like, if you're talking about the Red Bull thing, if you talk about Leipzig when they first came up in 2016 and how they were able to go straight into Europe, I think if you look at their relative financial power, they could be in a position to do something similar. If they got a European place this season, it would not stagger me. We'll see what happens in the rest of the transfer window. But remember, no one else has got money. No one else has got any TV money as it stands.
No, they've got stability where so many of the French clubs, as we've been hearing already, do not. Speaking of which, Andy, the other story I want to pick your brains about before we go back to the Moose to see how that game is going between Flamengo and Bayern is Bordeaux. Now, we know that they've been playing down in the outer darknesses of the lower leagues in France, but there was a question whether they'd even be allowed to continue doing that.
Yeah, that's right. They were given the AOK by the Chamber of Commerce in Bordeaux, and then by the DNCG under the condition of having quite a strict salary ceiling. That wouldn't have been good news for Andy Carroll if he'd have been staying. Actually, he's one of the few that fit under it, but he's come back to England, of course. His Bordelais adventure is over. But they are allowed to continue in the fourth tier. I mean, we're talking about that as if it's some sort of victory, because Gerard Lopez is still in charge. He was a bit Textor-esque in the fact that he was flung out of Lille before he could do too much major damage, went on to Bordeaux, took them down 3 divisions and saw them lose professional status. So, you know, they can't run an academy or anything anymore. Now they're going to have another stab, and presumably at some point someone else is going to try and take over. There was that group led by Oliver Kahn, who money-wise couldn't make it work in the end, and he was publicly torn out by Lopez, who really has no shame. And I think elsewhere in Europe, showing what a bad influence Lopez is not just on his clubs but on football in general. Boavista, who was top division club in Portugal last season, who were relegated after not paying their bills, which saw their stadium briefly shut, after not paying their players for various amounts of times, after being banned from making transfers for 6 successive windows. They were finally relegated, and they're relegated a division further to the 3rd division and out of professional football. Boavista, who, remember, are one of the only two Portuguese clubs to have ever won the league, who aren't Benfica, Porto or Sporting. It's a disgrace.
Oh, yeah. These people are, look, we all know that football has all kinds of good guys, but the people who run these clubs like this, I mean, Textor is one, Lopez is another. One hates to use a word that dehumanises them, but they're leeches. Leeches on the great game, and the people who have paid to watch these clubs and make them great over the years. To see Lyon, to see Boavista, to see Bordeaux brought to their knees by these overreaching, and they think they're so clever as well, don't they? And of course, they're not clever. Clearly, they're stupid. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible to watch. Meanwhile, there's a drinks break, which how lovely is that, in the game between Flamengo and Bayern Munich, including a very red-faced Michael Oliver, I notice, Ian Abrahams. How's the game going?
Yeah, half an hour gone. Flamengo 0, Bayern Munich 2. This tournament has been blighted by weather suspensions, and don't talk to me about last night's game, and also technology going wrong for the referee. Michael Oliver's just had that, so we've had a drinks break followed by about 3 or 4 minutes where Michael Oliver had to have his technology changed. Bayern's 2 goals, both inside the opening 10 minutes. A corner played into the post, headed into his own net by Polgar via the far post. Then Harry Kane from 20 yards out, left to centre, left-footed shot, which did take a deflection and beat Rossi at his near post. The only thing he really missed since then, a brilliant save by Manuel Neuer. Point blank to Luis Arario. It was a really fantastic save from Neuer, just showing that he's lost none of his powers so far. Another shot from Flamengo, cannons into the Bayern defence. Half an hour gone here, Flamengo 0, Bayern 2. By the way, the winners play PSG in the quarter-finals.
What lovely. Thank you very much indeed. OK, we'll take another quick break. When we come back, I want to tell you about everything that's been going on. Listen, we're going to review the European Under-21 Championship. Yes, we know England won, and we know that this programme is supposed to reach its tentacles way beyond English football. But I want to talk about it was a good tournament. It was a great final, and England's victory gives us clues to what might happen in the future of the World Cup. All that coming up in just a few seconds' time here on Trans-Europe Express. Well, folks, another goal in the game in the Club World Cup. Which way is it gone, Ian Abrahams?
It's gone to Flamengo. 33 gone. Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 2 after conceding 2 in the opening 10 minutes. The Brazilians have fought their way back into it, and what a strike too by Gerson, the captain. Ball in from the left-hand side, found its way to him. I'm going to estimate he's around 14, 15 yards out, bang in the centre of the goal, and he has absolutely leathered it. He's not left any imagination or chance for Manuel Neuer to get near it. In fact, if he had, then he probably would have broken his hand. It was hit with that much pace and ferocity, but what it has done is brought Felipe Luiz's side back into this game. It's Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 2.
Yeah, and without using a cliche, game on there, because I think the heat is having a major effect. Of course, it affects both sides, but I look at one or two of the Bayern players, including the England captain, and they look like they've played 80 minutes rather than 30. So Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 2 there. Now, as you probably have noticed, though it didn't make the back pages of the paper, as I was noting last night on Extra Time, England were victorious again in the Under-21 European Championships as they retained their title last night against Germany. Here's how the triumph sounded right here on talkSPORT.
No nation has ever won back-to-back Under-21 European Championships.
And he'll drop to it into the area, and he's rolled it in!
No one could stop this player.
Elliott with a delightful dink up the middle, and James McAtee, the England captain, is clear. Can he poke it into the path of Hutchinson in the area? He does. Hutchinson! 2-0 to England!
2-0, and we have to say, it's been coming.
Nabel dribbles down the left and then checks back onto his left foot away from Stansfield, and the header is in! Germany have got one back. It's Viper.
One goal, momentum changes. England just need to keep focused.
Nabel onto the right foot. Oh, what a wonderful goal! Into the top corner. It is a Germany equaliser. What a final in the Under-21 Euros on talkSPORT. Drop to Nabel. He's hit the bar. Via the deflection. Germany nearly win it. Extra time is looming. Back to Morton, who delivers a great cross. Header in! John Rowe!
Unbelievable start to the extra time.
It is history for England's Under-21s. A fourth European Championship title. England's young guns are kings of Europe again. The ticker tape goes off. McAtee hoists the trophy high up into the air.
Yeah, what a night and what a game. Andy, I think we need to reflect on that first, because it's fair to say that for both these countries, they already have a significant number of brilliant players who weren't there because they're already in the national team's first team squads. Then you've got the complication that many of their great young players are out at the Club World Cup. For the two teams to put on a final of that quality, and England could have been 4 up before Germany got into the game. But that's what football's like. You don't get 4 up automatically. It was a great game, and a credit to all the players.
Yeah, it was excellent, and I think in a tournament where you still had lots of teams of substance, you think of the Netherlands and the Spain,
France,
England were able to put away as well. France, of course, went to Germany in the semi-finals. You know, neither of these teams had a super easy route to the final. You know, the two teams that ended up in the final are the two teams that should have ended up in the final, and they produced a final worthy of it, which you can't always say, I don't think. And look, I don't think there are very many secrets in football nowadays. We know a lot of these players already, but I think it was a reminder of how good some of these guys are, and as well, maybe a slight reminder of when we're talking about, you know, the overworking of various players. I think it was quite interesting that some of the most influential players in the tournament, and I'm thinking Harvey Elliott, who's probably player of the tournament, James McAtee, various others, Jonathan Rowe, of course, who scored the winner in the final, who started out really well at Marseille but could never quite nail a place in the first team and in the first 11, and you know, was used fairly sparingly. A little bit of rest goes a long way as well, perhaps.
clearly. And we'll talk more about the way players are being treated a little later in Trans Europe Express. I think, Andy, we also need to give a few words here for Lee Carsley.
Yes.
Hounded when he got the interim job with the England team because he's not particularly good at press conferences. What he has proven, once again, he's very good at coaching football teams.
Yeah, he is. And I think, though, it's worth remembering that this is about development. I think, obviously, trophies speak for you, is clear, but once you get to the first team, and once particularly you get to the England first team, it's not about development anymore, which is perhaps different from, say,
sure.
I guess, if we're looking at like the possible international senior jobs that we would link Carsley with, I think a lot of people are out on the idea of him in charge of England, although maybe that has changed a little bit with Thomas Tuchel's touch and go start. But if you look at Ireland, I think that would be something completely different, because that is a lot more about development at the moment. You know, it's not the greatest Ireland side we've ever seen, but they've got a lot of pieces that could be shaped into a good side. You know, it's just like, I guess, the job that Craig Bellamy is asked to do for Wales. It's not about being a finisher. It's not about going and winning a World Cup or a European Championship or whatever. It's completely different within the same sport and the same competitions.
Unless, Andy, you and I get our heads together and Trans Europe Express sponsors Lee Carsley, the Republic of Ireland cannot afford Lee as a manager. Unless they get a sponsorship from Trans Europe Express. Another link, of course, to the Republic of Ireland. Forgive me for being so chauvinistic. Arguably the best player, Harvey Elliott was the best player in the tournament. Arguably the best player last night was the boy from Mainz, Paul Nabel, who lamped in that second goal and threatened to break the England crossbar with another shot, who afterwards said, maybe I'll play for the Republic of Ireland. I haven't got a full cap for Germany because my grandma is Irish. Come on, Paul, you know you want to.
It's an amazing thing to come out with in a press conference after a major final.
Indeed, the call of this small island is pretty strong, I can tell you. And by tomorrow, when I go on H&J, I will know exactly which village and which county he's from, and we'll be starting the campaign right here. Andy, we're having a great laugh, and it was brilliant for England. It was great for Lee Carsley and all the rest of it. But there's something that down deep in the coverage on the BBC, on their website, I found an amazing thing that they said. Take Argentina out of it because, of course, they're not European, but not all, and not even 80%, but very, very many of the last umpteen European teams to win the World Cup had won the European under-21s in either the previous cycle or the cycle before that. If you win the European Under-21 Championship, there's every chance that you're heading towards winning a World Cup somewhere not very far down the line. The mad exception, of course, was Spain's great team. None of those had played in the Under-21 team that did win it, because I suspect they were already all in the national team. But these are important tournaments, and if nothing else, it proves, Andy, quite apart from this World Cup thing, it proves that the English academies continue to churn out these fantastic footballers. Well, we can't take our eyes off this game in America. Another goal. Let's find out which way it's gone now. The Moose is here, Ian Abrahams.
Approaching half-time, Bayern Munich have their two-goal lead again. It's Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3. Leon Goretzka with the goal. It's a lovely goal. It really is. If Gershon's goal just before for Flamengo was all about pace and power, this is all about finesse and just stroking the ball exactly where he wants it into the net. He's picked the ball up, I would say, a couple of yards outside the D, maybe 25 yards out. He's bang central in the goal. The goalkeeper's got a sight of him, and he's just whipped it with his right foot. He could choose any corner he wanted, and he's stuck it in the bottom right-hand corner. There's now some real heat in the game. Harry Kane has gone down injured. There's pushing and shoving. It's 32 degrees with 60% humidity, by the way, as you want to know what the temperature was in Miami. And at the moment, it's all going Bayern Munich's way. Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3. Couple of minutes to go before half-time.
Yeah, and they've decided now that the best way out of this, the Brazilians, is to clatter Kane. He's now lying on the pitch, having had a pretty good wallop there, and the players are squaring up to each other. Of course they are.
I guess the other part of that, Danny, when we talk about, as Moose was saying, the fraying tempers on the pitch there, one member of the Flamengo team, I couldn't work out who it was, has decided it would be a good idea, maybe it was Gerson, to start on Jonathan Tah, who's 6'5".
Yeah, go on then.
And built like a bouncer at the worst nightclub in the world. I mean, I don't know what he thinks he's doing.
I suppose the answer to that is, you might as well start at the top and work down with the Bayern players. The England captain is still on the pitch there, getting treatment. It remains Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3. We'll move on now from the under-21s. I really enjoyed the game, not just because England won. I thought it was a brilliant game of football. And next here on Trans Europe Express, we're going to be turning our attention to everything that's going on in Spain, including the not quite done transfer, one of the biggest of the summer if it goes through, of Nico Williams to never quite got the dough Barcelona. That's next. I mean, it just doesn't stop this game. There's now one of the players from Flamengo being taken off on a stretcher. Jonathan Tah's been booked for his part in being attacked by one of the Flamengo players. He's also been booked. And there's still only, we're not even at half time yet. Andy, let's talk about Spain next. And the Nico Williams transfer from Athletic Bilbao to Barcelona, which will be one of the most important moves of the entire summer, is not quite yet done because Nico, for the second time involved in these two clubs, is looking for something. You can tell us what it is, but it's not something I'm sure that Barcelona can actually guarantee him.
That's right. He's asked, apparently, once they trigger the release clause, for a guarantee that he'll be registered. Because, of course, they've been here before. There's one thing signing a player. It's another thing being able to fit him under the salary cap and therefore being able to register him. Now, I think if we go back to last year, we think of Dani Olmo. Remember this time last summer, after Spain had won the Euros, or slightly after this time last summer, about 11 months ago, they were trying to sign Dani Olmo and Nico Williams. They had to reduce that just to Dani Olmo because they realised that they couldn't afford to sign both of them. Now, Barcelona feel they're in a better financial position this time around, partly due to the extension of their contract with Nike. Which gives them a bit more liquidity. Of course, it's not as simple as that. They can't spend all of it. But there's a buyout clause to be negotiated, 58 million euros. It's clear that Athletic, their whole policy of only signing Basque players, means that they don't tend to negotiate transfers. They just accept the release clause. and that's it. That's why Kepa ended up going to Chelsea for 80 million, for example. So there's no chance of any discount or anything like that. Now, Barcelona being Barcelona, they've tried to make it easier on themselves. They've asked, well, can we pay the release clause amount in instalments? To which Athletic have emphatically said no. And why would they help Barcelona, quite frankly? The thing is, it's a tightrope, because I think what's maybe not understood about release clauses is there is an agreement on paying the amount of stated in the release clause, which is fine. So say Barcelona offer 58 million and Athletic say okay. Or if Athletic say they don't want to negotiate and the release clause is triggered, so essentially this means Barcelona giving the money to the league, who then give it to Athletic, and it's all out of Athletic's hands. They don't have to do anything. They can't do anything. There are quite big tax implications to that. So Barcelona would be paying some extra millions on top of that, which they would rather avoid. Now, of course, if you're not adroit enough in the negotiations, you're going to really annoy the selling club, in this case Athletic, and they're going to say, all right, well, if you want to trigger the release clause, you get on with it, but we're not going to negotiate with you. And I wonder if Barcelona is skating a little bit closer to the win. Now, what we said and what you said before about Nico wants a guarantee that he's going to be registered. Well, presumably they gave that to Dani Olmo last year, but he was not registered. He was registered late once and then not registered again after Christmas when Andreas Christensen came back from injury, of course, and pushed. Once they got rid of that disabled player exception, it pushed the wage bill up, and it was sort of last in, first out. And, they had to go to a separate court, which is not really under football jurisdiction, to find a workaround to re-register Dani Olmo, which in turn has really annoyed La Liga all over again. And Javier Tebas has already said, look, if you sign Nico Williams, you won't be able to register him. I've seen the numbers. So quite what meaning that guarantee can offer. Now, we've had it in the past that if a player is not registered for the start of the league season, they can walk away from that contract, and the buying club, so Barcelona, would be due no compensation, and they'd still be on the hook for that transfer fee. Now, there's no suggestion that, Dani Olmo never seriously threatened to do that, and maybe Nico Williams, he must be going in with his eyes open. Of course, he's advised by his big brother Iñaki, would not be doing that. But that he's asking for that, I think, should be a little bit of a warning sign. Remember, Bayern are waiting in the wings in case anything goes wrong. And this week, Max Eberl, their sporting director, came back to Europe for transfer talks with various parties. One of those was with the Williams family, to say to them, look, if Barcelona let you down, we're here.
Yeah, and that's the shadow over this for Barcelona, who, ordinary fans of virtually every other club listening to our voices will go, how are these people allowed to get away with this stuff time after time after time? We're not suggesting anything they do is illegal. We're not suggesting that at all. But it's sneaky, and I'm not sure, of course, that other clubs trying similar stunts would be allowed to get away with it. And, of course, that's some of the inherent power that Barcelona and Real Madrid bring to the transfer market. People talk about the attractiveness of the two historic clubs, and, of course, that's entirely true. But they've also got all kinds of chicanery going on, all legal, he said, looking at my learned friends. It sometimes makes you want to pull whatever remains of my hair out. Meanwhile, the rebuild at Atletico Madrid continues, Andy, both in reality and in fantasy world, where they continue to ring up certain players in North London and say, come on, play for us. It's great. Come and play for us.
Well, look, Diego Simeone's got unlimited minutes and unlimited text now, so I don't know what you want him to do with those. I think that's probably part of the issue. Look, we'll come to Romero in a minute, but one that they do look like getting over the line is another formerly Tottenham-linked player, Johnny Cardoso, who is part of the Giovanni Lo Celso deal they had first option on from Betis, the USMNT international, who was born in Brazil, but has lived in the States since he was very small, and was born in the States and lived in Brazil since he was very small, who has been brilliant last season, and he's just
classic Atletico grunt and groan midfield defender.
Yes, absolutely. And he's got an attacking side to his game.
He
as
can
well,
run
which,
too, yeah, he can run.
We've seen a little bit of, which is quite interesting. Athletic continuing that rebuild that they started last season. I do think some of the criticism they've received, of course, though the first European team to go out for Club World Cup, has been a little bit unrealistic. I think, you looked at the fact that they were absolutely blowing at the end of last season, the fact that it was meant to be a transitional season, and because of the shortcomings of Real Madrid and Barcelona at various points in the first half of that season, they'd allowed themselves to get into a sort of title attacking position. They really want to take advantage of that this season, because obviously Barcelona have limited means in terms of building their squad, which they've shown it's their desire to do, and Deco, the sporting director, has talked about it being his desire to do. Real Madrid are a little bit more transitional than we might have expected at this point, and Xabi Alonso, will talk about them later and different things that he's trying on the pitch and shortcomings that they might have. Atletico feel this is an opportunity this summer. Now, we know Antoine Griezmann is staying, but it looks like he will have a reduced role, so there's probably at least one more attacker coming in, and, of course, another defender. They would like that to be Cuti Romero. Honestly, I don't see how they can afford that. I mean, presumably you price him even higher than me, Danny.
I do. I mean, I think on his day he's the best central defender in the world. And when I see the kind of money he's been quoted for central defenders with potential, I'm thinking about Branthwaite at Everton. Fantastic young player, but why would Spurs take 60 million, which is what I see quoted, for Romero? And yeah, maybe double that and see where we go with it. Thank you, Andy, for all of that. Meanwhile, after drinks breaks, injuries, referee equipment malfunction, fighting among the players, and a generally very bad-tempered but excellent first half, the whistle has gone for half-time in the game between Flamengo and Bayern Munich. Here's a report from Ian Abrahams.
You forgot the 4 goals, Danny. At half-time, Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3. They were ahead inside 6 minutes. Eric Polgar at the near post with a header into his own net from a Kimmich corner. 4 minutes later, it was 2. Harry Kane from 20 yards out. A shot slightly deflected, went in via the post. No chance for the Flamengo goalkeeper. They did pull one back, though, just after the half-hour mark. Gerson with an absolutely thumping drive from inside the penalty area. Completely different from the finesse and skill and whip that Leon Goretzka produced 4 minutes before the 45 were up to make it 3-1 to Bayern. Then there was that fight after Harry Kane was absolutely kicked in the knee by Pulgar, and just to show that justice sometimes it does come to you, Pulgar was the man who got stretched off because of it. Harry Kane is okay to continue. Jonathan Tah got involved in a bit of an altercation with Gershon. Both got booked. It did look like a bit of a mismatch. I doubt we'll see a repeat in the second half. What we will see is Flamengo having to come out and go for it. PSG await the winners at the moment. That's France against Germany with Bayern Munich. Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3.
Thanks very much, Ian. It's been a very entertaining game to watch out the corner of my eye. That's the first hour of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express done. I forgot to mention our poll, who's going to win the actual Club World Cup. We're 45 minutes further into it now. You've got more chance of being correct. You'll see the 4 choices we put there. Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG and Manchester City. You can go and vote for that on Twitter, or X as it now is, at Danny Kelly Words, at talkSPORT, or at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 R's. Go and vote in that poll. We've got tons to get through in the next 2 hours. Let's not mess about. Get to the news and sport first, and then we'll get back to Trans Europe Express. Yeah, welcome back, everybody, to the second hour, as I always say, of 3 of Trans Europe Express, taking you through to midnight here on talkSPORT. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, as always, and without whom, how could we possibly do the show, Andy Brassell. We've got some interesting things to do in this next hour. We'll be telling you about everything that's happening in Italy. We'll be interviewing the author of a new book about Verona's triumph about 4 decades ago, but still an amazing story in Serie A. We'll be talking in about 10 minutes' time about the way footballers, you know, they're well paid, they're pampered, but some of them are being treated appallingly. The latest news out of Ajax is disgusting, the way they're trying to chisel players out of their contract and out of the club. We'll talk about that, and it should be a belting for 60 minutes of entertainment and education. We'll also keep you up to date with that very, very exciting game between Flamengo and Bayern Munich. The odds against it ending 11 against 11, I would say Michael Oliver will not allow that to happen the way it's been going. He's Brassell, I'm Kelly, you're the beloved millions. Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. Now, Andy, as I say, we're going to have a proper and serious conversation about the way some football clubs, and maybe the way the game is moving, are treating their employees, their players. Now, all right, they're highly paid and pampered employees, but they are human beings with contracts nonetheless. We're going to start that, though, with perhaps the most high-profile case of club versus player imaginable, because it's time now for this.
Carrière le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de qui Mbappé? Allez, Kylian!
So what I'm talking about is when clubs decide they no longer need the services of people who have maybe served them well, who have got time remaining on their contracts, but they just want to get rid of them. And we'll come on to that in about 10-15 minutes' time. The latest example, though, and the most high-profile example imaginable, is that of Kylian Mbappe, subject of Mbappe Watch. We already know that he is having to harass the club through the courts and the football authorities to get nearly 60 million euros that he's owed, in his mind, and I think most people agree, by Paris Saint-Germain. But now, Andy, he's suing them for something called moral harassment. Can you explain this case, which is separate from the first one, though obviously there are some links?
Yeah, so it's a term used in France, but basically to describe bullying, edging on constructive dismissal. That's what it is. So it applies to the bit where PSG were trying to get him to leave 2 summers ago, when he had a year left on his contract, when it was clear he wasn't going to renew. So Nasser El Khelaifi came out in public and said that there are 2 ways. Either we sell him, or he doesn't get back in the team. That's it, really. You know, he can't go to the end of his contract. And
he was banished to the reserves to all intents and purposes in old money.
Yeah, exactly. And the only way he did that is by approaching the club. The only way he got back in the team is by approaching the club himself and saying, look, I'll renounce some of my loyalty bonus, to which he was due. So he's essentially paying several million to pay. And it's a remarkable situation. It's remarkable that the player had to go to the club to get the situation working again. And of course it did work for a bit, and then towards the end of the season he was left out, and that was a different issue. But basically what this case is about him being prevented from doing his job properly. That's what it's about. So the other case that's up at the moment is about wages. This is about the way he was treated on a human level. But I'm well aware that there are loads of people listening to this and out there will have no sympathy for him because of the perceived way that he conducts himself, about the perception of him as behaving like a bit of a diva. I don't think any of that is relevant, really. I don't think how much money he earns or what he might or might not be like as a bloke. And let's face it, none of us listening or broadcasting actually know the answer to that. We're not good friends with him.
It's only speculation, yes.
It's all supposition and assuming from what we know. So regardless of all that, everyone deserves their rights. You know, whatever they're paid, that they deserve their fundamental rights and their rights to get on and do their job that they're contracted to. As we're going to go on to say, this is not.
Go on. Sorry.
Go on.
As always in these cases, anything that Kylian Mbappe's contract contains was put in there and signed by the PSG people. He didn't make his own contract up.
Yeah, exactly, and that's all that really is being asked, like the ability to perform his job for what he was contracted to do, and like regardless of what you think about Kylian Mbappe, if this, you've said to me quite rightly, if this can happen to Mbappe, one of the biggest footballers in the world, it can happen to absolutely everyone, and whatever you think of him, that he has had the guts to stand up to not just the club, actually, not even the club, because he's been really clear about, he said he was happy for PSG when they won the Champions League, happy for his colleagues. He said he misses his friends and the players and the staff when he went. The problem he's had is not with the club, but with the people who own the club, essentially a nation state, one of the most powerful entities in football. And for him to go head to head with them and say, actually, I'm not accepting this, I think a lot of people would probably cut their losses once they've gone to Real Madrid and say, right, this is all over. Now, never mind the fact that, you know, turning your back on 60 million is a pretty big thing. This other case, which really underlines that it's important to him to do what is right and to not accept the treatment that he feels he suffered. I mean, it's no small thing, especially as it's going to be under the intense scrutiny of worldwide media.
Absolutely. And in the next section, we'll also talk about other examples, historic and current, particularly in Amsterdam, of clubs just treating their players, who after all, as I say, they're employees, contract holders and human beings, with something in the case of Ajax, when we give you the report, you'll be amazed, something approaching contempt. And I'll be really interested, because if Kylian Mbappe wins that case, it might, in its own way, be as important as John-Marc Bosman, because it will force clubs to confront the fact that they, no matter how much they pay these players, they are still employees with rights the same as anybody else. But we'll watch this one very, very closely. Meanwhile, back at the sort of football business, there is talk now that Vinicius has already agreed and signed his new contract with Real Madrid, though they haven't announced it yet. And of course, we all know that the day after tomorrow is a big day for announcing transfers, new contracts, because the football financial year starts. So lots of the things that have happened are being held back until the 1st of July, particularly, because then they go into a new financial year. But let's assume that the great Vinicius has re-signed for Real Madrid. That may have a knock-on effect, though, Andy, for Rodrigo and, dare I say it, Arsenal Football Club.
Yeah, it might do, because if they're invested in Vinny Jr. staying, which everything seems to point towards at the moment, and he would have a buyout clause in that contract, one suspects that not even a Saudi club would be able to spring. We're talking about $1 billion, which tends to
only Barcelona could get round it.
It tends to be the figurative number in the Spanish contract, which says that this is post Neymar, you really cannot spring this release clause. It shows they're fully invested in Vinny, and he and they. So surely something else has to give in that front line when you look at all the other players available. Now, the real question marks are over Rodrigo, who's shown concern in the past about his position, and does he still feel important? Now, Real Madrid, if they're going to sell him, they're going to ask a lot of money for him, but we know there's interest. How concrete that is and how possible that is to do at the sort of 80-90 million figure that Real Madrid want, I think is a question. But nevertheless, that would be something to cause Arsenal to at least give them a bit of encouragement. I think it's fair to say. The other question is Endrick as well, who another who's not been involved in this Club World Cup campaign so far, much like Kylian Mbappe, and who really has only had little moments at Real Madrid, mainly in the Copa del Rey, where he's been able to shine, where he's been able to show that potential. And you have to even ask, is there a loan down the line for him? Could that even be possible?
Which takes us to the Real Madrid on the pitch, making their sort of way into the new era under Xavi Alonso. And a bit like, I must admit, I kind of predicted it. I thought they might, when I saw the people, Trent Alexander-Arnold go, I thought, when are they going to play three at the back? Well, they've done both things in this Club World Cup, 4 and 3. And Trent looked pretty good as an underlapping wing-back in one of the games.
Yeah, he did when they beat Salzburg 3-0 in the week in the last group game. Obviously, Salzburg are not the best team in the competition, but Real Madrid were pretty good. And I think seeing Real Madrid playing a Xavi Alonso shape was really interesting. We said, do they have enough central defenders to do that? Well, of course, they slotted Tchouaméni back again in the middle of that 3, which really, I think, shows you that we can overcook the importance of written tactics. Sometimes, we spend so much time, I guess, which is quite a modern thing, analysing the tactical shape. We should realise that it's just a framework. And, Barcelona have been there before. When they ostensibly played with a 4 under Guardiola, they often played with a 3. When the fullbacks really went, whether it be Dani Alves, Maxwell or whoever else, and then Busquets would slide backwards and slip into the middle of a back 3. And that's really what Tchouaméni was doing in this game. But it did allow something of the future to be shown for Trent Alexander-Arnold, because, of course, we know that he's not really someone who necessarily charges towards the touchline. He's got such a range of passing, he likes to send it early. And he was slipping further into the centre of midfield, actually, when he was bursting forward. Made some great passes from there. Thought it was his best game for Real Madrid so far. So maybe it's something that could work going forward. Obviously, we assume that Real Madrid will buy a very attacking left wing back, probably Antonio Carreras of Benfica. Yeah. That's another deal we assume will happen before the end of the summer. And you would have to say probably another centre back as well, a specialist centre back. We shouldn't read too much into their good performance against RB Salzburg, of course, because they are. Let me just check the official language. They're useless, aren't they? They really are a terrible-looking team. Andy, we were talking later on about Roma. They were getting into. They've got some financial fair play issues coming up. We're told they have to sell a player tonight or tomorrow in order to satisfy the Italian financial authorities. Fabrizio Romano seems to think that's been done. It's a very interesting deal. Tammy Abraham, 20 million to Besiktas. Once again, the power of the Turkish contracts with no tax in them speaks, but it looks like Tammy Abraham, for a fee of around 20 million, will be joining Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Besiktas. Probably a good move for Tammy, and it certainly gets Roma off the hook as well. So that's Kylian Mbappe, and dealing with and trying to confront the way he's been treated by his employers. Not very well, I think any fair-minded human being would say. He is not alone, and that's next on Trans Europe Express.
Yeah, so a second ago we were talking about Kylian Mbappe and his confrontation with his former employers at Paris Saint-Germain. One of the reasons why this was such an important story to us is because it's part of something wider that's going on. Let me give you an example. Barcelona this week, I'm on about Barcelona again now, they have finally paid the wages of those players who deferred their cash during the COVID crisis. That's right, look in your rear view mirror, or if you're very young, open a history book and look at the COVID crisis. It's years ago. Thank God we've all survived it. Thank the living God, whoever you worship. Some of the players who are involved here, Andy, they've played for about 3 clubs since then. But Barcelona have finally ponied up the money they owe them. And indeed, they're still nickel and diming the very last bit of it, because they were making a new contract with Frankie de Jong, who of course has played brilliantly for them in the last 12 months, and they're saying, Frankie, will you defer your wages a bit more so we don't know what on earth is going on there? But that's kind of comic now, because they are paying it up. But this week, Andy, we've seen reports about 8 players in Ajax, and you can name some of them, because these are, if not household names, they're certainly first-team players who are being, in the effort to get them out of the club, they are being ostracised from the club that they play for, and no doubt many of them are very committed to, and also made to look like chattels, goods, services, not human beings.
Yeah, that's right. So 8 players who Ajax no longer wants to keep in the first team squad were informed of this by WhatsApp by the sporting director. Don't bother reporting to first team training, really. There's a special group set up for them, which is not unusual, we have to say, in modern football. Lofters or the Placadize, as they
right, now you need to explain, because I barely speak English. You speak about 15 languages. Why don't you tell us about the phrase loft and that other word, which I think translates to something like locker or cupboard or something?
Yeah, put in the cupboard is Placadize. The loft is where you put your unwanted bits, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're lucky enough to have one. So separated from the first teamers.
Andy, let me join you, because let me jump in there, because in this game that refuses to lie down in the Club World Cup between Flamengo and Bayern Munich, there's another important moment. Let's find out what's happening with the Moose.
What's happening is that Flamengo have a penalty. Flamengo 1, Bayern Munich 3. 7 minutes into the second half, ball clipped in by Diasquieta from the right-hand side, hit the arm of Michael Elise. Michael Oliver instantly gave the penalty, and there was nothing the former Crystal Palace and Reading man could do to argue his case. It was a handball, and Jorginho, formerly of Chelsea and Arsenal, he who runs up, skips and hops and normally scores, has put the ball on the spot and is up against Manuel Neuer. This to bring it back to 3-2. It's in front of the mass ranks of Flamengo fans. There are absolutely thousands of them inside the stadium, and I can tell you they are willing this to go in, and to quote you earlier, for it to be game on. Upsets Jorginho, he blasts it down the middle. There's no jump, there's no hop, there's no skip. He blasts it down the middle. Jorginho scores. Flamengo are back in this one. It's a 5-goal thriller. Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 3.
Thank you, Ian. And bear in mind there that this game has been played in 32, count them, 32 of your degrees Celsius. The players are having to go flat out the entire time. And any of the Bayern players hoping that they could cruise through the second half, that's now been obliterated. It was a handball, and of course it's a Premier League referee, Michael Oliver, so it was double jeopardy there, because it was, it would have been given, even if it had been a lot less obvious because of the way handball is treated in the Premier League. Andy, you were telling us about lofts, cupboards, discarded toys and garden equipment, which is what these footballers at Ajax have been treated like. But although you were telling me earlier on that this is now an accelerating process, because there are historic precedents for it, perhaps intern Wesley Sneijder, even Chelsea last summer with Conor Gallagher. But the one you were particularly pointing out was between Marseille and, this is quite recent, and their best player, some people say, Chancellor Mbemba.
Yeah, that's right. He had a great season, taking them to the Champions League, captaining the club in the Champions League. Roberto De Zerbi arrived, didn't want him, so they just binned him, really. They did everything they could to get him to leave. And I think this is what it's about. Look, we understand coaches come and go, and they're at liberty to interpret players and their ability and their suitability for their system as they wish. They are also required, I think, morally to treat them like human beings. You can't just go, okay, you're not part of my squad anymore, and just do everything you can to make them leave. I mean, this is very much the product of an era where many players are paid so much that it's difficult to find someone else to take on the contract.
Sure.
So essentially, the clubs have to sail perilously close to constructive dismissal and get these players in a position where they just don't want to be there anymore, and they're prepared to accept financial sacrifice. They're prepared to accept a move that they don't really desperately want, that they're prepared to accept a move that doesn't really suit their life or their family or any of those things. It takes a player, and we've seen it with Kylian Mbappe, we've seen it to an extent with Chancellor Mbemba as well, who's just out of contract now, having had that completely blank season really at Marseille.
A waste of his time, a waste of his talent, just all waste, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I have to say, Ajax are really trying to cover their losses with the thing that they're doing. So we said there are these 8 players, led by Carlos Forbes, who came through the academy at Manchester City and, of course, on loan at Wolves last season. Borna Sosa, who formerly of Stuttgart, who is the left-back for the Croatian national team. And basically, they're going back to the summer before last when they spent over 100 million in the very ill-fated reign of Sven Mislintat, who was investigated for insider dealing for some of those transfers as well, and just trying to get rid of those players. But the fact is, if you're going to make them saleable assets, it's totally counterintuitive. Even if you take away the argument of what is right and what is the right way to treat people, if you're treating these players like they're nothing, how can you possibly hope to sell them? If you're telling them they're worthless,
they're worthless.
You're telling other clubs they're worthless. So you're putting yourself in a position where you're not going to get a decent transfer fee for them, and you're probably going to have to continue paying some of their wages. It's ridiculous. It's a symptom of the way Ajax are being run at the moment, I think you have to say. But I think it's also a symptom of what's going on elsewhere in football.
And Andy, you mentioned that the pay, how hard it makes them to move on, and I get that. But it's also, I think there's a subconscious thing here. Maybe it's entirely conscious with the club's owners, and that is we're paying these fellas a load of money. Therefore, we have, unlike any other employees, we surely have the right to just push them around. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, because you are the people who have made these young men, in many cases, millionaires and multi-millionaires. And then don't be surprised when they just say, well, no, I won't just kowtow to what you want to happen. Now, fans, of course, are in the middle of this. Often they want to move players on to, refresh the squad and all the rest of it. But remember, these are men and women with proper contracts that you wouldn't want to see treated if it was in your industry. You wouldn't want to see people treated that way. Now, of course, everything in football is moving and changing all the time, which takes us back to Paris Saint-Germain, where another of their high-profile players, in this case the French midfielder Adrien Rabiot, has won a court case against them. And I think this is fascinating, given the background that we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. Tell us about Rabiot's case against PSG.
Now, of course, he's had 2 clubs since. He's at Marseille, which really upset a load of people at PSG. And I think maybe the reasoning for that move will come a bit more clear in the next minute or so. Was at Juventus as well, having left PSG. And the fact is, when he was running out of contract at PSG, they, again, moved him away from the first team. Now, we know what Rabiot's like. He's headstrong. He's well backed by his family, and so he sort of said, "Well, I'm not having this. I've still got a sporting case to be in this team, and I'm not being judged on my sporting merits, which is completely unfair." So this is a case that's been going on for a while. His argument that if he wasn't wanted anymore, he should have been allowed to essentially walk. That he should have been able to resign, as anyone in any job would do, rather than have his value and his career diminished by being kept captive really till the end of his contract and just sort of backed into this corner, as a lot of these players are. As I said, Rabiot's never the sort of guy who's going to accept that. He took this to court back home in France, and the tribunal found in his favour this week. He was awarded 1.3 million euros in damages. And I guess a lot of people in France now are asking, well, okay, if Rabiot's won this, what next? Are we going to reach a point now where players, if they have a disagreement with their club, are going to be able to walk away from their contract? You know, like any employee would be able to walk out of their contract if they felt they were being mistreated or unhappy in their job. And maybe that could revolutionise the transfer system eventually. I don't feel it's a Bosman situation just yet, but it's something to watch, because if other cases are brought along the lines of this Rabiot action, if they start getting some traction as well, then we've got something to talk about, I think.
Yeah, we're going to end up with, I mean, at the moment, contracts are all about sort of buyout clauses. You're going to get notice periods in contracts, because that's the only solution I can see, and it's going to lead to a great deal of uncertainty. Because when it suits clubs and teams, and I'm as bad, and fans as well, we're all about building the club and building the team around this group of players. And of course, when it doesn't suit them, as we've seen with Ajax, they're just worthless pieces of meat to be shown at the door and to have their parking privileges revoked, which I believe has also happened to the Ajax players. Look, that Rabiot case is a sideshow at the moment in the thing we've been talking about, but it could be, and I stand to be corrected here, in 2-3 years' time, we might be saying, well, the start of all this was that thing with Adrien Rabiot, wasn't it? Watch this space here on Trans-Europe Express, where next we'll be going over to Italy, talk about everything that's going on there. And, well, as Fabrizio Romano seems to be saying, Roma have, at least for now, appear to have sorted out the financial problems that were the headline story of what we were going to do next. Stick with us here on Trans-Europe Express. Still got 90 minutes. How lovely that feels. A whole football match of stuff to bring you on talkSPORT. gets closer and closer, doesn't it? The reunion of the century starts next week, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of tickets for Oasis in Manchester on July the 19th. Yes, you heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but talkSPORT can get you in. But that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel and put $5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. Listen up right now for everything that you need to know and how to enter.
Alright, kid. You have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5,000 spending money, all you got to do is text the word Oasis to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
Yeah, there you go. Your chance to go and see Oasis. We had that very funny thing with Noel Gallagher on talkSPORT. We played it out last night on. I was doing Through the Night. Very, very funny indeed. Andy, let's talk then about Italy. And we were going to lead with the fact that Roma, with 24 hours to go before they could sort it out, have got a financial issue that can only be solved by selling a player. But if we trust Fabrizio Romano, and I think we do in this case, it looks like they have already solved it.
Yeah, it looks like. Now, earlier in the week, they were hoping that their gift from heaven was an offer for Tammy Abraham from Zenit St. Petersburg for 20 million euros, which seems like quite on the high side, of course, because Abraham's contract is running down, because he's not got a future at Roma. He did okay as a backup on loan to Milan last season in what was a loan swap with Alexis Salamakers, with Salamakers coming to Roma, where he did really well. Of course, Abraham didn't want to go to Russia, and you can't blame him. That's affirming our faith in humanity, if anything. But now Besiktas have come in with the same offer. Quite why they're offering this much money, I don't know, because I kind of feel they could get it done for a little bit less. But either way, that more than covers Roma's financial loss. They're looking for something in the region of 8 figures to balance the books with UEFA. It's not with the Italian authorities, but with UEFA, that they need to avoid any punishment going forward in the Europa League next season. So this is great for them, and really they'll be able to start with a fresh slate on July the 1st and carry on building the team the way they want to.
Although, their financial situation, some of it is illustrating things like, El Shaarawy, who has served the club brilliantly, has taken a more than 50% pay cut to carry on playing there.
Yeah, he has. Talk about club man.
Absolutely.
That's what he's done. They've considered selling Evan Ndika at one point to raise the money, because Ndika arrived on a free. So any
Angelino, I suppose, would also have been in the shop window. Yeah,
that's right. Angelino, who is not felt Gasparini will want to keep. Both Ndika and Angelino were exemplary last season. I mean, Ndika played every game last season under Ranieri. He was that important for them. Of course, they signed him on a free from Eintracht Frankfurt, so as we said, so it would have been pure profit. And Angelino did not cost a lot of money, was eliciting interest from Al Hilal when it didn't look like they were going to get Teo Hernandez. A couple of Premier League clubs interested in him as well. And going back to our previous section, he was getting a bit of a prod from Roma. Would you like to go any of these places? And I don't think he particularly liked being rushed. And
that's slightly different from having your swipe card cancelled, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's got to be tough, given that it's
on a spectrum. Yeah,
he was one of their best players last season. So we'll see what happens in the future there. But look, this is a massive relief for Roma, who are paying really for some of the mistakes of the Mourinho era. When correct me if you've heard this one before, to almost quote Morrissey, but it is something that Mourinho watchers will have seen time and time and time again. Him digging a financial hole or helping to dig a financial hole for a team, and then just walking away and seeing the club still dealing with that years later.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, and Spurs fans are very quick to get on Daniel Levy's case about things, and often they are right.
Yes.
At least Levy didn't allow him to do that at Tottenham. So listen, Andy, it's tomorrow. What are we? We're only a couple of hours away from tomorrow now. Tomorrow is the last day of June, and therefore, as I say, we tick over into the next football financial year on the 1st of July. So tomorrow, as we saw last season in the Premier League with deals involving Aston Villa, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, etc., we could see some pretty hair-raisingly strange deals as try to deal with their current financial problems and spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, already, like, Abraham to Besiktas is ticking all the boxes for me, but I don't think it'll be the only one. You know, other clubs are sailing close to the wind as well. Not as many in the Premier League as previous years, but I would not be surprised to see a few little weird transfers within Europe happening while clubs try and get themselves in a better position and allow themselves to get into 25-26 unscathed.
Yeah, now, we want to move on then to, look, we all know that hilariously and legendarily, Marcelo Bielsa, fantastic manager, lasted all of 2 days at Lazio. Now, Maurizio Sarri has definitely done better than that. He's been there a few weeks. Maybe he's had enough too.
Yeah, I mean, it looked in the week as if he was going to quit. Everything seemed fine when he came back to the club. Of course, no European football next season, but Iglitare, the sporting director who really didn't get on with it all, is no longer there. He's now at Milan, presumably getting on famously with Max Allegri over there. And so it looked as if it was clear for Sarri to develop and shape the team in the way he wanted. Of course, to shape the team.
Andy, let me stop you there yet again, because there's been another goal in this game at the Hard Rock Stadium in the Club World Cup. Watching for talkSPORT, Ian Abrahams.
18 minutes to go. It is Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4. It's the third time tonight that Bayern Munich have had a 2-goal lead, and it's Harry Kane with his second. Ball played neatly into him by Joshua Kimmich just outside the penalty area. Kane took one touch, and with his left foot he drilled it past Rossi in the near post. His 41st goal of the season, Harry Kane. He's won the Bundesliga title. Will he be adding the World Club Cup to that as well? 17 minutes left for Bayern to hang on to reach the quarter-finals against the European champions Paris Saint-Germain. It's Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4.
Yeah, I mean, it is Harry Kane's 41st goal, if we count this tournament as part of the season just finished. I find this all very complicated.
Is it even part of a season?
No, it's not. It's a separate.
It's totally unprecedented. Interestingly, though, I think we look at this game and the conditions that it's been played under. We talked about the load on players. We've talked about the humidity and the heat down there in Miami. Not just the heat, but the humidity, which has clearly had an effect visibly on some of those players. Interestingly, every goal that Flamengo have conceded is being given away the ball 25 yards from their own goal every time.
That may be to do with the temperature, and may be to do with the nonsense of always having to play it out from the back in a certain way.
Yes.
I take that point. Right. This is not really part of last season or next season. This is like Narnia, when you walk through the wardrobe and you're into another world. This is Infantino's Narnia, isn't it? And he was sticking in Italy. Of course, Inter are at the Club World Cup. Interesting movements in and around their strikers in the past few days, some of which may result in Manchester United finding it ever harder to divest themselves of the services of Rasmus Højlund.
Yeah, I mean, to briefly go back to Lazio, one of the reasons, the main reason why Maurizio Sarri was not happy is because he won't be able to make any transfers before January, because Lazio are not in a position to do that. They're forbidden by their current financial situation from doing that, and he apparently wasn't aware when he was getting in there. So whoever Inter are going for up front, Lazio will not be competing with them. Angiai and Boni is the one for them. Played at Parma last season, did very well there, particularly in the first half of the season. A very creative striker, good leader of the line, and clearly someone who Christian Kivu, having coached him at Parma, wanted to bring in. A deal is very, very close now, and that's important because, of course, Joaquin Correa has gone, Marko Arnautovic has gone. As time went on last season, it was clear that Inter had the depth on paper, but not really the greatest depth, or not as great depth as we thought in reality in terms of quality. And this does mean something for Rasmus Højlund, because Inter were interested, very interested in bringing him over from Manchester United, maybe on a loan. Now that Boni's coming in, and now that young Esposito has had a really, really good Club World Cup, of course, assists, a vital goal as well in their games in the group. It looks like Højlund is off the table for Inter. So where else they can put him in Serie A has to be a question. But of course, a lot of United's future plans relying on what they can do in terms of outgoings.
And Andy, finally, on strikers and the Club World Cup, the looniness of this tournament in some ways illustrated by the fact that Sky and others are reporting that Chelsea have given Brighton £60 million for João Pedro, their Brazilian forward. And that transfer will go through as Chelsea continue to stockpile footballers at a previously unprecedented rate. But he will be allowed to be flown, helicoptered into this tournament. He can start whenever he wants. But there's a 4-day window between, 6-day window between June 27th and 3rd of July, where any players bought during then can play in the latter stages of the Club World Cup. Look, far be it from me to criticise a new tournament. It may turn out to be the best thing ever, but the efforts, the pretzels that they're tying themselves into at FIFA to make sure that top players go there. I mean, they're allowed. There'll be players transferred from one club to another in the middle of this tournament who will play against their old club. It's absolutely bonkers.
Danny, I think it's the ultimate showbiz move for the ultimate showbiz tournament. Have a player parachuted into the game while the game's going on. I think that has to be the next step, doesn't it? I mean, it reminds me of the glitch you had that I'm sure I've talked about before in FIFA. I think it was FIFA 99 on the PlayStation, where essentially you could. I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose. You could transfer players in while the game was going on. So what you would do is you would pause the game, you would go to the toilet, and then 5 minutes after coming back, when your friend brought Batistuta and Ronaldo off the bench, you would realise what had happened while you'd been in the bathroom.
I mean, look, I don't want to sound like an old man shouting at clouds, but it does seem a bit odd that, in every other tournament, you name your squad and you play to the end of the tournament. In this one, you just bring in whoever you want, almost willy-nilly, provided it adds to the entertainment. And I can see João Pedro being helicoptered into the Chelsea match now in a big glass case, like that money that Alan Stanford brought to Lord's that time. It'll just be landed in the middle of the pitch. Everyone will applaud wildly as Chelsea unveil yet another new signing. £60 million from Brighton seems to be the case. Next up, we're going to be talking to the author of a new book about the time where 40 years ago where Verona won the title in Italy. That's up next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, last roll of the dice for Flamengo in the game against Bayern. They're in Florida. They're bringing on 3 players for the last 10 minutes. People like Jorginho, exhausted, being taken off the pitch. They trail 4-2 to Bayern Munich. Ian Abrahams will keep you across that. Now we've got a very special guest for you. It is 40 years ago this season that Maradona went to play in Italy for Napoli, and many expected great things of that. But actually, in the 84-85 season, the title was won by an unlikely suspect, Verona. Richard Hoff has written a new book called Verona Campione. You can translate that for yourself. Even I can translate that. And Richard joins us now. Good evening, Richard.
Hi, Danny. Great to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Oh, look, it's absolutely fabulous that you've agreed to come on and talk about your book. Tell us, first of all, why you decided to write the book, and then give us something of the story that's contained within the book of Verona's, I hope I'm not being disrespectful, unlikely victory in Italian titles.
Yeah, unlikely is a massive understatement, Danny. You know, it was probably the greatest footballing upset in the history of the Italian game, really. And nobody really expected Verona to win the championship that season, especially when you consider, you know, the likes of Maradona, who was playing at Napoli, Platini at Juventus, Falcao, Zico, the guys like Mark Hateley and Ray Wilkins playing Italy, Graham Souness as well, Laudrup at Lazio. So you had some of the greatest football players in the world were coming to Italy. Italy at that point was very much seen as the greatest league in the world. Socrates as well at Fiorentina. So Verona, they didn't exactly come from nowhere, but nobody expected them to be contenders that season. They were aiming probably for a 4th or 5th place finish. They were only playing in Serie A just a couple of seasons previously, Serie B a couple of seasons previously, so they didn't exactly come from nowhere, but they took everyone by surprise. And first game of the season was against Napoli, and Maradona's debut in Italy, and they won that game 3-1, and that basically set the scene for the rest of the season.
And so what about the players who were influential? We talked about Maradona coming in for Napoli that season, and you know it took a while for him to settle and get going, and for Napoli to build around him, which I guess again would have been a contributory factor in Verona having the space they did to win the title. But tell us about the signings of Hans-Peter Briegel and Preben Elkjær and the impact that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that you have to remember back in those days was that you were only allowed 2 foreign signings per team. So it was crucial that those players that did come in were able to hit the ground running and were able to adapt to the Italian way of life and the Italian way of playing football. And Briegel and Elkjær absolutely did that. Briegel was left back for West Germany. When he came to play for Verona, he moved up to midfield, and he was this absolute monster. The Italian players they'd never seen anyone like him before. You know, they were all pretty small, lean Italian players from that era, and Briegel was an absolute beast. Elkjær was an incredible football player as well, such athleticism, and scored some amazing goals that season. And from the very first game, Briegel was responsible for marking Maradona, and he marked him out of the game, and he scored a goal of his own as well. So the 2 foreign signings for Verona hit the ground running, and they scored some crucial goals at crucial points in the season, whereas guys like Rummenigge and Maradona that season at Napoli struggled a wee bit. It took Maradona a couple of seasons really to find form in Italy, and for Napoli to build the team that would eventually win the Scudetto with him. But in Verona, everything just clicked that season. The players had a wonderful bond. They had a coach who was able to bring out the best in them. These guys, some of them, rejects from Inter, rejects from Juve, but they came together and they had the season of their lives.
I was going to say, Richard, a mention of Hans-Peter Briegel brought a smile to my face. Perhaps because I myself was a very technically limited footballer, but I loved Hans-Peter because he made up for what technical limitations he had by dominating games physically. And in those days, very unusual, when people were still kicking lumps out of each other, his socks rolled down to his ankles, no shin pads most games, just saying, come on, he dared people to kick him. He really was. And when we did a few years ago a series called Cult Heroes, I was absolutely insistent that we did half an hour on Hans-Peter Briegel. So how did the title come about? Was it like with Leicester here in England, where it took people a little bit of time to get their heads around the reality that this team was leading and was not going to be coming back to the pack, or did they sneak up? How did the actual run into the title go?
Well, I mean, if you go back to 1981, just very quickly, Osvaldo Bagnoli was appointed coach in 81, Verona playing in Serie B at that point, and he transformed the club immediately, immediate impact. They won immediate promotion into Serie A, finished in 4th place in their first season back in Serie A, which is a pretty unprecedented first season back in the top flight. Back-to-back Coppa Italias. So by the time the 84 season kicked off, they were a club that had assembled a really decent team, a really decent group, and they'd already achieved some pretty good things, reaching back-to-back finals in the Coppa Italia. But again, nobody really expected them to push on from that. What happened at the beginning of the 84-85 season was the arrival of Elchier and Brigo, and they were the cherries on the cake, as the Italian players told me at the time. They were the two that just brought that extra experience, that extra physicality that you talked about that Brigo had, but also Elchier. Elchier was unstoppable, really, in front of goal, and they kind of transformed the team. But they won that first game against Napoli, and the amazing thing is they stayed on top of the league for the rest of the season, which nobody saw coming.
Yes, it is. Sorry, I was listening very carefully, Richard, out the corner of my eye. The tone of this game between Flamengo and Bayern, which has been bitter, best summed up in the last 2 minutes. The following two players have been booked for horrible fouls: Harry Kane and Jamal Musiala. The Bayern players have had enough of the way that they've been treated by the Flamengo players. Indeed, Kane's tackle, it was in Premier League. I suspect they would have seen a card of a slightly deeper hue. Let's put it no more strongly than that. So how does it look? You must have spoken. Sorry, Richard. You must have spoken to people who were around for this triumph. How has it looked back on historically now? Because it is such an outlier to what we expect in Italian football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spoke to the players involved, but I also was really keen to speak to the fans. And I've been in Verona for 14 years now, and I know a lot of the fans from that generation. So I was really keen to get their perspectives on it as well. And you can imagine the memories that they have. I was speaking to one guy a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me he remembers, like, as a kid, Italy won the World Cup in '82, Verona won the championship in '85, and then the World Cup came to Verona in 1990. So you can imagine what that was like. Those 8 years as this little guy who's kind of grown up in Verona, to have all this going on in and around his football club. My kids, for example, they've never seen Italy play in the World Cup. So you can't imagine what it must have been like for a guy like this young guy who grew up with, you know, his local team winning the championship, Italy winning the World Cup, and then the World Cup coming to his doorstep at the Bentegodi. So for these guys that I spoke to, not just guys, girls as well, I spoke to female fans from that era as well, and they've got vivid memories. They can remember every single match, every single goal, every single away trip as if it was yesterday, and they were just so pleased to have the chance really to tell their stories and to share it with a wider audience. So that was
Richard,
one of the great joys of writing this book.
Absolutely, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it already because I love an underdog story. Thank you very much. It's called Verona Campione, and it's by Richard Hoff. It's about all that. I would personally, given how physical Peter Briegel and Preben Elkjær were, I might have called it Two Ungentlemen of Verona. But that's why I'm on the massive bucks. Let's get back to America. Final stages of what's been a tumultuous game between Flamengo and Bayern Munich, all happening before the disbelieving eyes of Ian Abrahams.
Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4. We're just coming towards the end of the first of 7 added minutes. Not quite sure where Michael Oliver got 7 added minutes from. He's booked Conrad Leinen now for a foul as well. And as you rightly say, at the end of this game, you haven't gone into the book, and you consider yourself not really having done your job. It's been a fantastic game. The highlight, really, the 2 goals from Harry Kane. And Thomas Muller's coming on. You know what? This won't be his last appearance of Bayern Munich. Next game against PSG might be, but that's for another day. We've been to the second now of 7 added minutes. Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4.
Yeah, thanks, Ian, and thanks for keeping us up to date. But as I say, what has been a very difficult game to follow. Injuries, equipment breakdowns, goals galore, and I've got to say, it's been rather fun. Next up, we've got another hour for you between now and midnight, including a lovely, juicy whole 30 minutes with Tim Vickery. Don't go anywhere. Keep listening to me, Danny Kelly, him, Andy Brassell, here on talkSPORT and Trans Europe Express. Hello everybody and welcome back to the third and final hour of tonight's edition of Trans-Europe Express here on talkSPORT. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Brassell is the essential oil in the engine, and you are the listening millions, which is exactly how we have it. A lot to get through in this hour. We'll be talking about everything that's been going on in Germany, including talking about Nick Woldemade.
Hey mate.
I'll get his name right in a second, but lots to talk about Germany. Andy, we're taking around the leagues. Some really interesting transfers happening at the moment, and we'll be reviewing everything that's happened in the Club World Cup in the last 24 hours. All that's coming up, and of course we're going to South America very soon to talk to Tim Vickery. Thanks for staying with us. We really appreciate it. Welcome one, welcome all to Trans-Europe Express. Before we go to South America and to Tim Vickery, and of course this result is important for South America, the final whistle has gone at the Hard Rock Stadium, not the Hard Rock Cafe, in the game between Flamengo of Brazil and Germany's Bayern Munich. Give us a full-time report, please, Ian Abrahams.
Yeah, it's Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4. Harry Kane scored a goal in each half. The first after 9 minutes, a shot which just took a slight deflection before going in off the post. That was inside the opening 10 minutes. Bayern had already led through a Polga own goal. His second came 17 minutes from the end, played in by Joshua Kimmich, one touch, and then he fired past the goalkeeper, again low at his near post. Neil Goretzka got the other Bayern Munich goal. Gerson with a thunderous drive from inside the penalty area, and Jorginho, the former Arsenal and Chelsea man, from the penalty spot, were the goal scorers for Flamengo, who never gave up but could have conceded another 2 or 3 quite easily to Bayern on another day. But Vincent Kompany's side, they will play Paris Saint-Germain for a place in the semi-finals of the Club World Cup. It finished in Miami. Flamengo 2, Bayern Munich 4.
Yeah, meanwhile, in the Gold Cup that's happening also in the United States, concurrent with the Club World Championship, the game between Canada, soon to be hosts of the World Cup, of course, a year away now, and Guatemala has ended in a 1-1 draw and gone straight to penalties. Canada won, Guatemala won, penalty shootout. Let you know about that a little later. The winner goes through to the semi-final, which means it's time now, as we advertised, to be joined by our great friend from all the way from South America, Tim Vickery. Evening, Tim.
Very good evening, and you join me just as a cloud of gloom descends on my adopted city of Rio. Going into yesterday, Rio, not Brazil, Rio had 3 teams left in this competition. One fell yesterday, Botafogo beaten to fellow Brazilians Palmeiras, and Flamengo have just fallen. Now we've only got Fluminense left, and they take on Inter Milan tomorrow. So in a couple of days, I fear that this competition, which has been the source of every bus stop and supermarket queue conversation, probably won't be getting quite the attention that it has been getting while the Brazilians were doing so well.
Tim, this game this evening, which I've watched with great interest, I can see Andy on the screen in front of me, and then I've got a screen to the right. So Andy, I'm quite rude, because I'm often looking away from him to watch the game. In many ways, it was like the South America versus Europe matches of yore, when it was a single match for the World Club Championship. It was extremely feisty, it was extremely dirty, and in the end, the European power told. But let's be fair, Flamengo put up a pretty good fight there, but in the end, the physicality and of course the forward line of Bayern Munich was enough to see them through. You mentioned the 2 of the 3 teams from Rio are out now. This will cause national mourning, won't it? Or certainly local mourning.
Well, not Botafogo, the expectations weren't particularly high. So I think they go home reasonably happy, and they've made some money. For Flamengo to go out even before the quarterfinals is a massive disappointment. But they did come up against a wonderful Bayern side, and the whole thing that flew through the plans awry was Benfica beating Bayern in that last group game, which Bayern didn't want to happen. Because for Bayern, it's given them Flamengo and now Paris Saint-Germain. This wasn't the way that Bayern planned it, but it's the way it's happened. And it reminded me a little bit. It was a terrific game of football. But this one reminded me a little bit of when Flamengo play one of the other sides from South America. Because what Flamengo's found out is when you step up in quality, the margin for error just doesn't exist. And what the decisive thing in winning the game here was Bayern pressing Flamengo as they tried to play out from the back.
Yep.
And that brought them the corner that led to the first goal. And it brought them some of the other goals as well, especially the two there by Harry Kane. And Flamengo had to really fight deep. They had to show a lot of sacrifice. They had to run a long way back towards their own goal. The problem was when they were there, close to their own goal, you cannot give the ball away against a side like Bayern because they will punish you. And boy, did Harry Kane give an exhibition of finishing. And the first goal, left-footed, took a slight deflection. It was goal bound anyway, I think. And the second goal, right-footed, he just makes it look so easy, so easy. It won't make me particularly popular with elements of my family. But when the ball started rolling, I found it very hard to cheer against Harry Kane.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Tim, you're not very popular with large chunks of your family, so that's really not. That's no big improvement, is it, Andy?
No, indeed.
Tim, what do you think this means for the competition more broadly? As you say, two big Rio clubs going. I mean, are we looking at the sort of situation now in this expanded Club World Cup where the South Americans have had their fun, and this is the bit where the Europeans take over? That, for me, is the most concerning thing, because the most compelling games of this Club World Cup so far have been that culture clash of South America versus Europe, South America in particular versus Europe. Of course, there's still Latin American involvement with Monterrey, for example. But if it turns into like a quasi-Champions League, do you think that's harder to sell it as a concept going forward? Because with the best will in the world, if we get to the end and it's a Chelsea PSG final, for example,
we've seen this before.
Yeah, what does that really do for the concept?
Yeah, I do think it's a problem, because what it becomes then is a kind of Champions League without the fans, doesn't it? And it's been the South American fans who've really, every time that the director of TV cuts to the images of the fans, it's been the South American fans who've been broadcasting the message, this thing really matters. So losing them is a massive, massive blow. However, and as someone who covers South American football and watches more of it than is healthy, what would you rather watch, Mr. Brassell, sir, Mr. Kelly, sir? Would you rather watch PSG against Bayern, or would you rather watch the rather dull spectacle that Botafogo and Palmeiras came up with yesterday, which really wasn't a particularly good advert for the Brazilian game, was it? It was a little bit like, how about we have PSG against Botafogo, but we take PSG away and bring in another Brazilian side? And then as a spectacle, I thought the thing kind of died on his feet.
Tim, the answer to your question is this, and please forgive me, now I'm going to make myself unpopular with the listeners. I've worked with you for over a decade. I respect you amazingly, your knowledge of football. But when you were telling me, and I bit my tongue, that the Brazilian sides would go deep into this tournament, I listened. Mid-season for them, very hot conditions, much of which they're used to and all the rest of it. But in my heart of hearts, I just thought, there's no way these clubs are going to produce 11 players to beat the kind of, or 16 players to beat the kind of power that even running at 85% these European giants are going to possess. It may be an eye-opener for Brazil, and it may be that Brazil will continue to hoover up all the best talent in South America and say, no, we'll catch up. But I wasn't in agreement with you, I must be honest, that the Brazil teams might win this, because I think there is still a massive gap. Now, I could, Palmeiras may well go on and win, in which case I will be eating humble pie with a side salad of crow. But I don't know. I suspect I might be going to McDonald's rather than that, if the truth be told. Tim, of course, tell us that all Brazilian match, which you say quite rightly was a shocker, but it has set up the sort of Estevão derby against Chelsea.
Yeah, it's Esteval's current club against the club that he joins possibly after the final whistle if Palmeiras are beaten. And Esteval, who I think he's the most talented thing to come out of Brazil since Neymar, but he's talked himself into trouble in the last few days. It's the first big mistake of his career. He's been getting some hammer from the Brazilian fans. Brazilian fans can be ruthless. They do play the game of build them up to knock them down again. And he's only just turned 18, and there's so much responsibility heaped onto him. And he hasn't been playing badly, but he hasn't been scoring hat-tricks and so on. And after the third group game, when they needed to come from behind to draw with Inter Miami, he gave an interview where he said, "It's hard to focus on this because my mind is already in with Chelsea and next season." Now, that was a huge mistake, because as far as Palmeiras are concerned, this is everything. Palmeiras are mocked in Brazil because they're a giant club, but they don't have one of these intercontinental titles. Everyone else has. All of their rivals have. They don't have it. So for Palmeiras, they've spent big for this competition, and they've tried to peak in this competition, and it's everything to them. And to hear the star young man say that he's thinking about Chelsea, it's kind of broken all the unwritten rules. So Palmeiras, there was some speculation that he wouldn't play yesterday against Botafogo. He did, and he didn't play badly at all. I think the coach is taking him off too early, quite frankly. But now the game is against the team that he is about to join. Now, Palmeiras, they could go on in. It's as quarter-final opponents go, Chelsea are far from being the most difficult, and they're not going to win a lot of points for style. But this is the way that Abel Ferreira plays, the Portuguese coach. There is, I know I've told you this a few times, but there is a lot of the young Jose Mourinho about Abel Ferreira. He doesn't really care about the aesthetics. What he cares about is grinding out results and grind their way past Chelsea. I think it could be possibly Manchester City in the semis, and he'll try and find a way to grind his way past that again as well. As for Fluminense tomorrow against Inter Milan, I wouldn't hold out too much hope, but while there's Palmeiras, there is still chance of a Brazilian triumph, although it won't be one for the purists.
Talking of how Palmeiras got that done, as you say, grinding out the result, Tim, a lot of people, I guess, from a distance would have presumed that it would be Esteval that pulled the rabbit from the hat. But it was Paulinho in the end, which I found fascinating. Brilliant individual goal, and really, really nice to see him do something, because it looked very promising when he arrived in Europe with Bayer Leverkusen, got completely derailed by that injury. Tell us a bit about how he's done since he's gone back to South America.
Well, this is an amazing story. He did pretty well with Atlético Mineiro, where he forged a good partnership with Hulk. Joined Palmeiras, joined them injured. They spent quite a lot of money on him. They spent a fortune on Victor Roque, the centre forward. It's the most expensive player ever signed by a Brazilian club. They haven't got too much out of him yet. But Paulinho, they spent a lot of money on him, and they haven't been able to get him on the pitch because he had an operation, and he's been carrying this injury. So he had an operation. He comes back. He is unable to play for more than 30 minutes. So they brought him on yesterday. He got a goal. The extraordinary thing about the goal is it came off his left foot, which usually is only used for getting on the team bus. He's very, very one-footed, but it took a little deflection, which I think was decisive. So it was a goal with his left foot, and he'd come off the bench, and he was taken off before the end. And again, this is an illustration of how important this competition is to Palmeiras. He's been easing his way back from an operation. It obviously hasn't been entirely successful, because once this competition is over, he will have another operation. So Palmeiras is essentially spent a lot of money on him in order for him to come on and have little cameos. And a fascinating statistic about the Palmeiras campaign. One of their goals, the first one against Al Ahly, was an own goal. Every other goal has been scored by a substitute.
Tim, let me finally ask you, because we're running out of time. I suppose the news is starting to reach Brazil now that João Pedro, who had such an excellent season for Brighton, is being transferred any moment now to Chelsea, again Chelsea, for 60 million English pounds, and will now be helicoptered into the middle of the tournament.
Yeah, well, it's been something of a surprise that they haven't found a way to shoehorn Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar into this tournament. But
Nat Lofthouse, yeah.
Yes, yeah, Len Shackleton. I don't know why I thought about Len Shackleton. Probably because his autobiography had that page on the knowledge of the average football director, and he left the page blank. Yes, it does kind of, with the exception of this Bayern Flamengo game, which was I thought was a cracking game of football.
Yeah, me too.
It hasn't been particularly good for the competition this round, has it? On Botafogo Palmeiras was poor. The interruption, yet another interruption, was farcical. PSG Inter Miami was a mismatch. I ended up desperate for Flamengo not to equalise in this one, because I thought that extra time would have been absolute cruelty to these footballers who shouldn't be subjected to this. So there have been problems, as I said earlier on. The thing that really has ratcheted the whole thing up and probably saved the competition has been the South American fans, who now one by one are leaving. But at least if the South American fans are leaving, there's a very good South American player coming in who may still have a part to play in the rest of the tournament.
Tim, thank you as always. Just brilliant. Thank you so much indeed. Andy, let me tell you that in the Gold Cup, the game between Canada and Guatemala ended all square, 1-1. The penalties, Guatemala have just missed one to win the tie, and it's level again, and Canada have now scored, so Guatemala have got a penalty to remain in the tournament. I mean, Canada really want to move on in this, because they're building a team towards the World Cup. We'll have a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about more about some of those round of 16 matches in the Club World Cup, myself and Andy, including a lovely feud between Lionel Messi and one of the younger players in world football. It's great fun. Join us for that in a few seconds' time here on talkSPORT. Welcome back to Trans-Europe Express. And Andy Brassell, if I tell you on the screen in front of me, I can see Jesse Marsh looking very, very, very unhappy indeed. You'll know what's happened at penalty shootout. Now, I'm not across Guatemala's football history enough to say that this is one of their biggest wins, but I'm pretty sure it must be, because it takes them into the semi-final of the Gold Cup, past one of the teams who will host the World Cup in 12 months' time. Canada missed 2 penalties, and eventually they paid for that. Guatemala, who are now they're knelt in a circle around each other for the post-match conference, chat, whatever it's going to be. They're obviously, I mean, it's a huge result. They're clearly over the moon, and the Canada players are traipsing off, looking pretty crestfallen. So Guatemala through to the semi-final of the Gold Cup. And I wanted to talk to you about some of those games that Tim mentioned in this round of 16 in the Club World Cup, because there have been, apart from the football, there have been other scripts. Now, look, the game between PSG and Inter Miami was, if ever, and forget that PSG are the champions of Europe. They are a brilliant team. But, US soccer is doing great, is, bringing in more money, is becoming more powerful in the world and all the rest of it, and the World Cup is there in a year's time. But if ever the gap between a developing football nation, I'm sorry to call the United States that, but that's what they are, and the big European clubs was illustrated, it was that game. It was a non-contest. It was a blowout, as they say in American sport. But the fun bit of it was watching Lionel Messi playing against his old colleagues from Paris.
Yeah, it was fun. Maybe not for him, particularly not in that first half. Look, it seemed to me, of course, with it being played on American soil, and as someone pointed out to me when I was out there, a lot of people getting the chance to see Leo Messi playing competitive football against really big teams in a situation that didn't cost them several $100s to turn up and see him. Yeah. So I can understand the environment in the stadium, particularly in the second half when PSG really, to all intents and purposes, having won the game in the first half, had switched off and allowed him a little bit more space to have a dart and a dash here and there. It was interesting hearing Zlatan Ibrahimovic talk about it afterwards, very much from the old football world, saying, look, if Messi wasn't the Messi we're used to, it's because of the players he was surrounded by. He used to be surrounded by players like me and Xavi and Iniesta, but it's an Inter Miami defeat and a defeat for football, not a defeat for Messi. If you surrounded him with good players, he'd be that good player all over again. Well, maybe. No one's saying he's completely lost it. Clearly, he's past his peak, which you would expect at that age. He has nothing more to prove. But I suppose it must have been quite a sobering experience for him, because
particularly, Andy, when to cut to the chase here slightly.
Yes,
he did his best to organise what he thought was a team that would help him win the Champions League with PSG, and that included being slightly snidey about young players coming into the club, just like Vitinha.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he already went, as we know, to the management at PSG when they signed Vitinha and said, why are you signing players like this? We need better players than this. And that he has widely reported to have said to Vitinha yourself, not only are you bad, you're making me look bad. I don't think that's aged particularly well, has it? When you're looking at now someone who might succeed him even for the Ballon d'Or, depending on what happens for the rest of this tournament. As Luis Enrique said to us when I was out in LA a week or two ago, look, there are several players in my team that could feasibly win the Ballon d'Or, and maybe that'll even split the vote. I think you could look at him, you could look at Hakimi, you could look at Ousmane Dembele, who's the favourite.
I'd vote for Kvaratskhelia if I had a vote.
There are others, exactly. William Pacho, I think, has been outstanding, and that's before we get to Donnarumma. So I think. I guess there are a couple of things that are problematic with this. Firstly, it's clearly still a big story in France, as I've said. It was focused on very closely in France, that the handshakes between the two teams and the interaction between Vitinha and Messi. Now, Vitinha was just behaving normally. A bit of an exaggerated wink from Messi that's caught a few headlines. But also the bit where Vitinha gets the ball, goes around Messi like he's a statue, and Messi seems to take sort of a swing at him midway in the first half, which I think is the closest really that Messi got to him being involved in that first half. Of course, look, as Marquinhos said the other week, there's nothing harder than chasing the ball around, except when Messi hasn't got the ball, he doesn't have the capacity to chase it around anymore. No. His teammates do that for him, which is why he was so uninvolved in that first half. Look, I know a lot of people would have liked to see Messi have his moment in that game, and fair enough, there's no doubt that he's very probably the greatest player ever to have played the game. But it's not his time. It's someone else's. No. And I don't think that mean-spiritedness that he seems to have shown while he was at the club, while they were trying to rebuild, really reflects that well on him, to be perfectly honest.
Because of the contrast with how he's publicly perceived versus Cristiano Ronaldo, it is easy to convince yourself that he is a lovely little football pixie. But like most people at the very top of professional sport, he is a hard case, Messi, and he usually gets what he wants, and he usually says what he wants to say as well. And he just quickly, because we're running out of time, slight worries about the World Cup coming up, coming through from the game between Benfica and Chelsea. Now, it was quite a close game. Benfica were in the game pretty well. And then but the whole thing revolved around nearly 2 hours for a weather break. Now, the club who plays in the MLS in that stadium do not play during this time of year during the day. They play in the evening. And we saw a perfect illustration of why that is and why the World Cup can't be allowed to have loads of games interrupted by 2 hours waiting for the weather to get either to stop raining or for the players to be able to carry on because of the heat.
Yeah, and it's been something that's happened more than once in Orlando. And look, the stoppage undoubtedly changed the destiny of the game. As Enzo Maresca said, Chelsea were cruising at 1-0.
That's fair.
I think honestly, the rest of us, such was the delay with just 5 minutes to go, and obviously the players wanted to carry on, I think, on both sides. The rest of us got on with our lives, really. I mean, I went to bed assuming that Chelsea was sitting out a 1-0 win. I woke up in the morning to find out it was a 4-1 victory after extra time. Most of the spectators left the stadium, which again is a massive problem on a tournament of this scale. It makes it a joke. Never mind what the players had to go through. And as Maresca said, Benfica were never equalising in that game if there hadn't have been the break. So it just completely distorted the competition. It completely distorted the match. It completely distorted the occasion. And he's right. It can't be allowed to happen again.
No, that's very fair. Indeed, I was broadcasting this morning here on talkSPORT through the night, and I had planned to talk in the past tense about the game between Benfica and Chelsea. Hey ho, for the first half an hour of the programme, we were still getting live updates from a game that started 4.5 hours earlier. Now, I know American sports like their 4.5 hour events, but not soccer matches. Come off it. Now, look, you can't do much about the weather when it happens, but you can predict what weather is likely in certain parts of the world. And they're going to have to really keep an eye on this before the upcoming World Cup. We'll come back now. Look, and before anyone thinks we're picking on the United States here, I was in Germany for the 2006 World Cup for a total of 6 weeks. It was never less than 90 any day of that summer. So it's not just America. It happens elsewhere as well. And it's to Germany that we'll turn our attention next here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, heading towards midnight here. We'll take you right up to the end of the day. Then, of course, you'll stick with talkSPORT. Plenty of good stuff coming through to take you through the night. Andy, let's turn to Germany now. And first of all, I'm going to rely once again on your legendary linguistic skills to tell me how to pronounce correctly the name of the German under-21 centre-forward, who we're going to discuss next.
Nick Woltemade, who really has had like an extraordinary year. And it is only a year, because if we rewind to this time last year, he's leaving Werder Bremen, a place where he's shown promise but can't get in the team. He's nowhere near getting in the team. And so Stuttgart sign him, and you assume that it's sort of a bit of a high ceiling, low risk gamble, I suppose.
Suck it and see sort of signing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because he's an unusual profile, 6'6", pretty mobile. And of course, a lot of things happen at Stuttgart since they've qualified for the Champions League. They get rid of Seydou Guirassy, or not deliberately, but Seydou Guirassy got a low buyout clause, ends up being buttered up and whisked off by Borussia Dortmund. And then there's various injuries to Dennis Undav throughout the season, who's been brilliant. And, I think I expected to make an even bigger impact in Euro 2024. But someone has to pick up the slack when they've got extra games, when they've got to play in the Champions League. And who's the guy who shows up? Is Nick Woltemade. He's great last season. Increasingly so as the season goes on. And he's not just a leader of the line, which makes him quite atypical in modern European football, because you don't have a lot of players of that size, of that shape, of that profile.
We should let people know he's 6'7". He really is a throwback to the days of. Well, you can tell me the sort of players he's a throwback to,
but he's not clumsy. He's not clumsy.
He's a handful. He's a proper handful. Yeah.
Yeah, he's someone who's very mobile, who links play very well, who's scoring an increasing amount of goals too. So people start having a little look at him, and that look is accelerated by the fact that he's brilliant at the Euro under 21s, and clearly he's going to be a part of Germany's senior squad going forward. You could argue that maybe they've lacked that type of striker since perhaps even Miroslav Klose.
He's probably leapfrogging people like Füllkrug now, isn't he?
Yeah, certainly, because Füllkrug was really important, and now he's faded from view because West Ham hasn't really worked out for him. So. Yeah. I guess, like, you could say that Woltemade is, as 10 years Füllkrug senior, very much in front of the queue. So you look at the fact of how the market is this summer as well. So look at Real Madrid having a little look at him. There's no doubt about that. Also Bayern Munich, who are always looking for this backup for Harry Kane. Now, look, Max Eberl has come out today, who we said, the sporting director of Bayern, has come back to Europe, come back from the Club World Cup, to do some face-to-face negotiating over various transfers. It's been a rocky transfer window for Bayern since the Wirtz deal fell through. He's said today that we're not going to, Max Eberl, that we're not going to pay crazy prices. The problem being that Stuttgart have only just signed this guy, and they want 100 million euros, or they've priced him at 100 million euros for a player.
Bada bing and bada boom.
Well, exactly. They can do what they like. It's a player they signed for free last summer that they put all their faith in. It seems, though, that Woltemade is keen to make that move to Bayern. Now, perhaps
why, Andy? Because for another 24 months, you'll be on the bench waiting for Harry Kane to run out of puff.
Well, for a year, maybe. I guess that's the way you would sell it to him, wouldn't you? That it's a year of handover. Look, I think that sounds like a strategy that is not brilliant for anyone, because I think at 23 and on the sort of curve that he's on, Woltemade needs to play all the time, or as much as possible. I think it assumes that Harry Kane will go at the end of next season, which is not impossible, but I think we don't have any total clarity on that, even though a lot of people around Bayern think it's more likely than not. But to assume that even in a year's time, Woltemade will be able to to pick up where Kane left off. On the back of one good season, I think that's an enormous leap, to be perfectly honest. Look, Kane is one of the greatest strikers, if not the greatest striker in modern European football history. We saw it again tonight in quite unforgiving conditions, how he will turn up again and again and again.
And when he was getting clogged in those conditions as well.
Exactly.
So much so, of course, he took revenge and nearly got himself a red card, but that's another story.
Yes, but even if look, he has earned himself the right to get away with those kind of fouls. I think is the point.
That's
isn't
not
it?
the view of my Arsenal supporting household, I can assure you.
Right, okay, but he's got considerable status, I think it's fair to say.
Sure.
It may be that Voltemada may play till he's 40 and never score as many goals as Harry Kane. I would think that is quite likely. Clearly, there are other things that he can add, but he doesn't have the goal scoring of Harry Kane. He doesn't have the all-round game of Harry Kane. And, of course, you could argue that he's stunting his development by, even though this seems like a dream to most of us, going to a place where he will earn 5 times the money for doing 1/5 of the work. Sure. I think it's an interesting choice.
He is not a person running a till in a supermarket. That deal doesn't make any sense if you're a footballer and wants to develop yourself.
No.
Andy, I'm just cutting you off there because there's so much to get through. The bank transfers between Liverpool and Bayer Leverkusen continue because obviously the German side have made a lot of money with Frimpong and Wirtz going to Anfield. Some of it's going back the other way tomorrow because it looks like it's true, Jamal Kwanzaa will sign for Bayer. I've got to say, that's a fantastic get by the Germans.
Yes, I think every time that Simon Rolfes and Fernando Caro in the offices at Bayer Leverkusen open their eBay account, they probably get a little pop-up saying, you may be interested in items from this seller, and that seller being Liverpool Football Club. Kwanzaa is, I agree, a fantastic get. Huge upside, really good player already, can only get better, I think. It's the sort of player that they like to take on and develop because they've sold for so well. In the case of Wirtz, they've got the relationship with Liverpool. They've got the ability to spend a little bit more to get him in. Now, you floated the name Harvey Elliott to me. I would love to see him at Leverkusen. I think wage-wise, it's quite hard to imagine that happening, even though I think football-wise, it would be very, very interesting. Also, if we're talking about that sort of 9.5 type player that they might be looking to replace Florian Wirtz, interesting, they're closing on a deal for Malik Tillman of PSV, formerly of Rangers, of course, spent a year there on loan earlier in his career. It was brilliant last season, very, very talented footballer, the US forward. It's going to be around the €40 million mark. So look, for the new era of Ten Hag, Leverkusen are not scrimping.
Really?
They are going out there to really reinforce that team and prove they can be a threat to Bayern all over again.
Now, a team that wants to be a threat to Bayern and indeed to Leverkusen is RB Leipzig, of course. And for them, over the past few days, it's been a tale of two Werners.
Yes, because they wanted Fabregas. They wanted various other coaches, including Oliver Glasner. Didn't happen for various reasons, not least missing Europe. They've set their sights for the last couple of weeks on Ole Werner, who's done a really, really good job at Werder Bremen. It's been quite an acrimonious split. Werder haven't been pleased to see their coach turn on them as they see it and go, but he has been confirmed this week. But one Werner in, one Werner out. Timo, after being cruelly spurned by your Tottenham Hotspur, clearly Leipzig didn't want him back and didn't imagine seing him back.
He got a Europa League winners medal.
Yeah, as I'm sure he was wearing around his neck as he came back to the offices with his dog. But anyway, he is being packed off to, surprise, New York Red Bulls. So there you go. Timo Werner in the MLS could well be top scorer in the MLS this time next year. Who knows?
Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. No. And nor did it surprise me that Spurs didn't take other option. He simply didn't work out for the fella there. 1 minute, Andy, on Jurgen Klopp and his increasingly public statements about the game. Obviously he's involved with RB Leipzig, but he's really, really in one of the German national papers came in two-footed tackle on the whole business, not just of the Club World Cup, but of the amount of football individual soccer players are expected to take part in these days. And of course, he is, in this particular case, bang on.
Yeah, but it seems like he's forgotten what his job is. Like he is the head of sport at Red Bull. So presumably, the Red Bull Salzburg view is us being at the Club World Cup. Bit weird, but great. We're making a ton of money, and we're probably getting ourselves back into the position where we can become dominant in the Austrian game, having lost the title the last 2 seasons to Sturm Graz. So does Klopp know what he is and who he is at the moment? Because for me, it feels as if he's been put in this job that might suit his state of mind, which might suit his lifestyle, which might suit like taking a bit of a breather after having coached at such high intensity over the last 20 years or so. But does he seem politically adept enough to do this job to you? Because he certainly doesn't to me. I mean,
Andy, I've listened to him a lot. I like a lot of things that Jurgen Klopp says, and I like the fact that he's pretty forthright with his views. But we all know that many of us at various times in our life have been promoted or demoted, but mostly promoted into jobs that weren't quite what we were good at in the past. And I suspect there is one more brilliant coaching mission inside that man's mind, heart, spirit and body. And sitting around being a person pushing bits of players around a global map of the RB empire, I think he'll be happier when he gets the tracksuit back on. He may not suit him at all. He may prefer to be doing adverts for hotels. I don't know. But I suspect that all of this makes me feel that this, when you hit him on the side of the head, it probably doesn't chime very well. It's probably a very dull, flat sound because he's not getting to run a football team, and I suspect that's what he wants to do. Let's take a break. When we come back, Andy's got some other great stories for you from all over Europe and the rest of the world football as we head towards the finishing line tonight. The 3 hours has flown by. Thank you for being with us. The finishing line tonight of Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, don't forget, if you've missed any part of the show or you just want to hear it in condensed form, the podcast will be out very early tomorrow morning, the Trans-Europe Express podcast, from wherever you get your pods. Myself and Andy prattling on about important matters to do with European football. Download it and make us famous. Andy, we've got about 8-9 minutes still to go of tonight's programme. Let's move on to some of the stories that we have, mop up some of the stories. I'm going to do these in an order we didn't practice them, Andy, because the more I look at it, the John Duran to Fenerbahce transfer, again, the transience of modern football, that was a huge move when he went off to Saudi Arabia. What was it, 6 months ago? And now he's going to Fenerbahce, who are not even the champions in Turkey, but of course the Turkish clubs, as you will explain to us now, hold one huge advantage, one stick over everybody else in European football.
Yeah, it's that top rate tax in Turkey is so low that they're able to offer often clean salaries, post-tax salaries. So that makes a massive difference. Of course, once the John Duran deal, as we expect it to be, is finally complete, we'll know exactly what the numbers are, because if it's a deal over a certain amount, it's required to release the exact details, financial details of that deal to the Turkish Stock Exchange. So that's how we can know how much you will be paid basic, how much you will be paid per game, per goal, etc., which is normal to sort of cover yourself against loss of form or an injury or all that sort of stuff. We know that they are paying a lot of money for the loan, so upwards of 15 million euros in loan fee. That's before the wages, which will not be at the Saudi level, but will not be cheap either. And for a developing player as well, you know, this is not Galatasaray going and getting Victor Osimhen, is it? But no. Whether you think John Duran has got a higher ceiling is really irrelevant, I think, and just as irrelevant as the numbers of how he's scored for Al Nassr since he's been out in Saudi, I would argue. So there's that. There's the fact that they've also got a deal in place, at least in principle, with Jadon Sancho. Now, you might think, okay, Jadon Sancho probably still wants to prove himself in the Premier League, keen to find himself a club there, maybe a West Ham or something like that could be in order, maybe even a return to Dortmund. And then Fenerbahce come along and go, what would you like to come here? And so he does that thing that I guess builders, when they don't want to redo your kitchen, say they quote you an unrealistic figure, and so Jadon Sancho's people say 12 million after tax, and Fenerbahce go, yeah, okay, we'll just put it through the printer and then get you a pen.
Yeah, we thought you were going to ask for 15. Well done. Yeah.
It's extraordinary, really. And again, no one else in Europe is paying Sancho that money because of the last couple of years, and the good bits have still been good. I'm not arguing with that. But it's not been consistent. And he's still really a bit of a reclamation project after what's happened at Manchester United. So it would be a good deal for United as well, because the sort of fee that they feel they want to receive to break even on the deal, or as close as they can to break even on the deal, is something that, again, Fenerbahce would be happy to pay. They're keen to make Mourinho happy, and they're pushing the boat out to do so.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier in the show, it was broken by Romano earlier on in the programme. Tammy Abraham, also taking advantage, I guess, of what the Turkish clubs can offer, has gone to join Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in Besiktas in a £20 million deal. That, again, the value of the player, given the injuries, had to be fair to him, and his lack of impact in Italy. It's hard to understand, really, except that Turkish clubs do like to bring in very, very star players to keep their league, you know, front and centre, presumably for their enormously enthusiastic home. Sometimes we forget how huge a country Turkey is, and just the enthusiasm for their own local league is enough to justify some of these transfers.
I mean, it's remarkable to me, Danny, because if you think this deal with Tammy Abraham, who, as I said, I thought did okay at Milan last season after a couple of downward seasons. I think it is risk inherent, because they've just brought over, like the year before, they brought over Ciro Immobile. He's going back to Italy. It looks as if he's going to Bologna. That move is not quite complete, it seems, because he's waiting for some sort of payoff, because, again, he's been getting daft wages in the Turkish Super League, so he needs a bit of a cushion before he goes back to Italy. Clearly he can't go back to Lazio because of the issues that we referred to earlier. So they're just crawling out of the rock, from under the rock of the Immobile contract, or more or less, and then they're going to lumber themselves with a new one. Interesting.
Yeah. Let's move on then to Portugal. And when he got let go by Ajax, that absolutely disgracefully dysfunctional club, as we discussed earlier, who knew we'd ever talk about Ajax in these terms? It used to be the paradigm for how to run a European football club. but they've also let their coach Francesco Farioli go during the last few months, and he's been touted for a number of important jobs, including at one stage when Spurs were looking for someone to replace Ange Postecoglou. His name came up there. He's on his way to Porto, and I think this is again a big get for the Portuguese league.
It's very interesting, Danny, and of course, like I think it's unfair to say that Ajax let him go. He let himself go because he saw what was happening upstairs there, and with each passing day, he's been proved right. I think it's fair to say.
Okay, that's fair enough. He organised his own escape tunnel, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he did. But I think he needs to grow roots somewhere because he's been at clubs, a variety of clubs for just one season. You think he was coaching in the Turkish Super League, then he was coaching Nice, then Ajax, and now Porto, which is another big club, but a big club like Ajax that's been a little bit dysfunctional. Andre Villas-Boas has come under a lot of stick in recent times for what's happened there. As we said, Martin Anselmi, the former Cruz Azul coach who came over halfway through last season, billed as the Argentinian Amorim, hasn't worked out like that. The players haven't clicked with him at all. He hasn't got on with the media at all. And really, the only thing holding up Anselmi's exit is the fact that they've got to agree an exit fee for him. He wants to receive the whole rest of his contract, which obviously Porto are not going to pay him. So we're going to see what's going to happen. In that sense, the Club World Cup has actually worked out quite well for Porto because they would be in a position, if they hadn't gone to the Club World Cup, as disastrous as it's been on a sporting level for them, they would have got to the end of last season, gone through pre-season with Anselmi, it would have gone badly again, and they'd have ended up firing him in October, by which point they'd be out of next season's title race. So really, the Club World Cup has done them a favour because they'll have a clean slate for the start of 25-26. Farioli is an interesting coach. He's a coach who I think we can see from his work at Ajax is prepared to be practical. It doesn't always have to be pretty football, so maybe it'll edge closer to what Sergio Conceição sometimes did there. But they seem to be pretty close in terms of a broad agreement on the contract. So once they finish with Anselmi, I feel this will move pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me when the big three Portuguese clubs appoint a non-Portuguese coach because the quality and quantity of Portuguese coaches, we only have to look at every league around the world, is so extraordinary. I'm always a bit amazed, really, when the production line is ignored and somebody was brought in from outside. Of course, Farioli's Italian. It'll be very interesting to see how that one goes. And finally, Andy, 30 seconds on a career that once appeared to be absolutely heading for the stars and now possibly a little bit stalled and hoping to re-engage itself in Denmark. I'm talking about Youssoufo Mkoko.
Yeah, who was on loan at Nice last season after his Borussia Dortmund career had sort of run aground. You may remember he was the youngest player to play in the Bundesliga at 16 years and 1 day, youngest player to score in the Bundesliga away at Union Berlin, and it looked like he was the future of Dortmund. And then it became a little bit more difficult. They signed him to a big new extension. When his contract was running out, it got tougher from there. He didn't fit a number of different coaches. There were concerns about his all-round game. Went off to Nice last season and started okay, but then it really fell to bits from there. And with just a year left on his contract, he's been sold for €5 million to FC Copenhagen, very, very fine developers of players. So maybe they'll be able to salvage something from him there. It feels like a good place to develop because remember, after everything that's happened, he's still only 20 years old.
Exactly.
So there's plenty of time to go.
Listen, thank you, Andy, for all of that. Thank you for everything. Thank you all for listening for all of or part of tonight's show. I'm back tomorrow at about 2:30 on H&J. In our poll, Paris Saint-Germain is your choice as the likeliest winners of the Club World Cup. Coming up next year on talkSPORT, it's When the Lights Go Out with Carl Frampton. Thank you for listening. God bless you all. Good night.